Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku became a civilian teacher? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. The first thing Katsuki noticed wasn't the pain, though that was waiting in the wings, a jagged, hungry beast pacing at the edges of his consciousness. The first thing he noticed was the silence. For a year, the world had been a cacophony. It had been the scream of sirens tearing through the night, the rumble of collapsing infrastructure, the wet, tearing sound of normal flesh, and the terrifying, sonic boom of air pressure that signaled the arrival of a war god. It had been orders shouted over comms that crackled with static and panic. It had been the sound of his own blood rushing in his ears, loud as a freight train, right before the lights went out. But now, the world was dead quiet. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was sterile. But chemical. It was the silence of a vacuum where life had been SED out, leaving only the hum of machinery behind. Katsuki blinked. The motion felt Herculean. His eyelids were sandpaper, scraping against eyes that felt too dry, too sensitive. The harsh fluorescent lights above him stabbed downward, two long, rectangular spears of artificial brightness that made his head swim. He tried to inhale. That was the mistake. The moment his chest expanded, the beast lunged. A spike of agony, absolute and blinding, radiated from the center of his sternum. It wasn't the surface sting of a cut or the dull ache of a bruise. It was deep. It felt structural. It felt like his ribcage had been cracked open, rearranged by a clumsy god, and wired back together with barbed wire. He gasped, a wet, choked sound, and the monitor beside him spiked in a frantic rhythm. Beep, 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 beep. His heart. He could feel it. He could feel the organ beating inside him, but it didn't feel like his. It felt foreign, heavy. The rhythm was slightly off, a syncopated thud 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 that echoed against his ribs like a fist pounding on a locked door. It was the heart that had stopped. The heart that had been pierced. The heart that Edgeshot had sewn back together with his own body. I'm alive, Katsuki realized, the thought coating his mind with a layer of cold dread. Why the hell am I alive? He remembered the rain. He remembered the hole in his chest. He remembered the look on Best Jeanist's face, a look of pure, unadulterated horror that the man usually kept hidden behind denim collars. He remembered the cold. God, the cold. It had started in his fingers and toes and raced inward, turning his blood to slush. He shouldn't be here. By all the laws of biology and warfare, Katsuki Bakugo should be a corpse cooling in the mud of a battlefield. He tried to move his hand. His right arm was heavy, sluggish, wrapped in something thick. He managed to twitch his fingers. They were numb, tingling with the pins and needles sensation of nerve damage, but they moved. He turned his head. The movement sent a fresh wave of nausea rolling through his gut, but he gritted his teeth and forced his neck to rotate. He needed to know where he was. He needed to know who else had survived the end of the world. The room was massive, a sterile expanse of linoleum and privacy curtains. It smelled of iodine, bleach, and the metallic tang of filtered air. And there, in the bed next to him, separated by a chasm of floor tiles and a forest of 4 stands, was Izuku Midoriya. Katsuki's breath hitched, causing another spike of pain in his reconstructed chest. If Katsuki looked like a wreck, Izuku looked like a ruin. The boy, because that's all he looked like now, a small, broken boy, was propped up slightly by pillows, but he looked as though he had been discarded there. He was wrapped in so many bandages that he resembled a prop from a horror movie more than a human being. Both of his arms were casted from shoulder to fingertips, elevated in complex slings that held them suspended in the air, wires and pins keeping the shattered bones aligned. His face was a topographic map of violence. Deep purple bruising bloomed across his jawline and under his eyes, fading into a sickly yellow at the edges. A bandage covered half his forehead. An oxygen cannula ran under his nose, his breath fogging the plastic with shallow, uneven puffs. But his eyes were open. They were dull, stripped of their usual electric shine. They looked like moss in winter, frozen, dormant, gray-green. He wasn't looking at Katsuki. He was staring straight up at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling, unblinking, as if he were reading the secrets of the universe in the pattern of the dots. "Don't," a voice rasped. It was a wrecked sound. It sounded like dragging a stone over concrete. It didn't sound like Deku. Katsuki tried to speak, but his throat was a desert. He swallowed, tasting iron. "Don't." "What?" "Don't try to sit up," Izuku whispered. He still didn't look over. His lips barely moved. "You'll tear the sutures. The internal ones." Katsuki slumped back against the pillow, defeated by gravity and the warning. "How long?" 3 days, Izuku answered. "You've been in a medically induced coma for 3 days. They had to keep you under. To let the graph take." The graph? The foreign piece of himself. The edges of edge shot. "My heart," Katsuki croaked. "It stopped twice on the table," Izuku said. His voice was a monotone, reciting facts as if reading from a textbook. "Once in the field. Once in surgery. They had to open you up again. Recovery girl. She couldn't use her quirk. Too much strain. It was all manual." Katsuki closed his eyes. He could picture it. The blood. The panic. The frantic hands of surgeons trying to restart a battery that had exploded. "We won," Katsuki said. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. It was the only thing that would make the agony in his chest permissible. If they hadn't won, if Shigaraki was still out there, then this pain was just an insult. Izuku finally blinked. A slow, heavy movement. "Yes," he said softly. "It's over. All for One is gone. Shigaraki is gone. Dead. Dust," Izuku whispered. The word hung in the air between them, heavy and final. The end of a legacy of hatred that had spanned generations. Katsuki lay there, processing the victory. It didn't feel like triumph. It didn't feel like the complete victory he had always screamed about. It felt like exhaustion. It felt like the silence after a building collapses, when you're waiting to see who crawls out of the rubble. He looked back at Izuku. He needed to see him. He needed to verify the reality of him. "Oi," Katsuki grunted. "Look at me, nerd." Slowly, painfully, Izuku turned his head. The motion clearly cost him. He winced, his nose scrunching up in a way that was painfully familiar. When their eyes met, Katsuki felt like he'd been punched. There was nothing there. Usually, when Izuku looked at him, there was something: admiration, fear, frustration, affection. There was always a spark. Now, there was just a hollow, vast emptiness. It was the look of a house that had been gutted by fire, leaving only the exterior walls standing. "You look like hell," Katsuki whispered. "You look worse," Izuku countered weakly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Report," Katsuki ordered. He fell back on their soldier dynamic. It was safer than the emotional minefield of being two broken teenagers. "Give me the damage report." Izuku's gaze drifted down to his own arms. They were mummified in white plaster and gauze. "My arms are done, Kaken," Izuku said. "For good this time." Katsuki felt a cold spike in his stomach. "What do you mean, done?" "Recovery girl can." "No," Izuku cut him off gently. "She can't." The bones were pulverized. Not just broken. Powdered. They had to use metal rods to rebuild the structure of the forearms. The nerves are shredded. He paused, swallowing hard. "I won't be able to hold a cup for a few months. I might never have fine motor control again. Making a fist is probably impossible." Katsuki stared at the suspended limbs. The arms that had thrown Detroit smashes. The arms that had carried the weight of the world. They were useless now. Dead weight. "But that's not the worst of it," Izuku continued. His voice dropped lower, becoming fragile, like spun glass. Katsuki braced himself. He didn't want to hear it. He knew, deep down, what was coming, but he didn't want the words to exist in the air between them. "It's gone, Kaken." Katsuki's fingers curled into the sheet. "What is?" "One for all." Izuku said the name of the power with a reverence that bordered on grief. I had to transfer it. Forcefully. To break through his regeneration. I gave him the quirks. One by one. Fa Gene. Danger Sense. Black Whip. I threw them at him like grenades. Izuku's eyes welled up, but the tears didn't fall. They just sat there, shimmering under the fluorescent lights. And then I gave him the core. I gave him the stockpile. It destroyed him from the inside out. And you? Katsuki asked, his voice barely a sound. I have the embers, Izuku whispered. He looked down at his chest, right where his heart beat a normal, uninjured heart. I can feel them. Just a little heat. Like a candle that's about to go out. But the fire? The power that made me. It's gone. The silence rushed back in, filling the room like water. Katsuki felt like he was drowning. Izuku Midoriya was quirkless. He had climbed the mountain. He had clawed his way up from the dirt, taken the hand of a god, broken his body 1,000 times to prove he belonged, and achieved the summit. He had become the greatest hero. And now, he was back at the bottom. But he wasn't the same kid he was at 14. He was broken now. He had tasted the sky, and now he had to live on the ground with shattered arms and a soul that had been hollowed out. And Katsuki? Katsuki was alive. Katsuki, who had bullied him. Katsuki, who had told him to take a swan dive. Katsuki, who had spent 10 years trying to push him down. Katsuki was alive, and he still had his quirk. He could feel the sweat accumulating in his palms even now. He was going to heal. He was going to recover. He was going to go back to being a pro hero. He was going to live the dream that Izuku had just sacrificed to save him. The guilt crashed into him. It wasn't a wave, it was a tsunami. It crushed the air out of his lungs. It made his reconstructed heart hammer against his ribs in a panic rhythm. I am a parasite, Katsuki thought, the self-loathing acid in his veins. I am living on borrowed time and borrowed blood. He gave up everything, and I'm the one who gets to keep going. Why do you look like that? Izuku asked. Katsuki snapped his eyes back to Izuku. Like what? Like you're the one who lost. Because I did. Katsuki hissed. The anger flared, sudden and hot, masking the grief. I lost Deku. Got stabbed. I was dead on the ground. You had to burn yourself out to fix my mess. It wasn't your mess, Izuku said calmly. It was the war. I was supposed to win. Katsuki's voice rose, cracking on the high notes. I was supposed to catch up to you. I was supposed to be. You are, Izuku interrupted. You're the great explosion murder god Dynamite. You won. Stop it. You're alive, Kaken. At the cost of you. The shout tore out of Katsuki's throat, raw and ragged. The pain in his chest exploded, a white-hot supernova that made him gasp and curl inward. The heart monitor screamed beep beep beep. Kaken! Izuku tried to lunge forward, but his casts caught in the slings. He jerked back, biting his lip in pain. Stop. Breathe. You're going to rip the graft. Katsuki squeezed his eyes shut, riding out the wave of agony. He forced himself to inhale. 1, 2, 3. The monitor slowed. The pain receded to a dull throb. You shouldn't have done it, Katsuki whispered, tears finally leaking from his eyes, hot and humiliating. You should have let me die. You should have kept the power. I couldn't, Izuku said. His voice was steady. A world without you isn't a world I wanted to save. Katsuki froze. He opened his eyes. He looked at Izuku. Izuku was looking back with that terrifying, open honesty that had always been his greatest weapon. He meant it. He absolutely 100% meant it. He had traded the greatest power in the world for Katsuki Bakugo's life. The yearning hit Katsuki then, a physical blow that hurt worse than the heart injury. It was a desperate, clawing need to bridge the distance between them. He wanted to reach out. He wanted to grab Izuku's face. He wanted to press his forehead against Izuku's and breathe the same air and apologize until his voice gave out. He tried to reach. He lifted his left hand, the one without the IVs. He stretched it across the gap between the beds. It fell short. Inches short. His fingers scrabbled at the empty air. Izuku watched the hand. A look of profound sadness crossed his face. He shifted, trying to move his own arm, but the cast was heavy, immobile. He couldn't reach back. They were 2 feet apart, but they might as well have been on different planets. I'm sorry, Katsuki whispered to the empty space between their hands. I'm so sorry, Izuku. Don't be, Izuku murmured. He let his head fall back against the pillow, exhaustion finally reclaiming him. Just fit, okay? Just stay there. I'm not going anywhere, Katsuki vowed. It was the only promise he had left to give. I'm right here. Izuku's eyes fluttered closed. Within moments, his breathing evened out, hitching slightly on the exhale. Katsuki didn't sleep. He couldn't. He lay there in the white, sterile silence, listening to the machines keeping them alive. He watched the rise and fall of Izuku's chest. He watched the way the bandages wrapped around his broken arms. He realized then that the war wasn't over for them. The villains were gone, the cities would be rebuilt, but the war inside this room, the war of recovery, of redefining who they were without the powers that had defined them, was just beginning. And it was going to be harder than fighting all for one. Katsuki looked at his own hand, still resting on the edge of the mattress, reaching for a boy he could no longer touch. I will fix this, Katsuki swore to the silence. I don't know how. I don't know if I can. But I will spend the rest of my life making sure you don't regret saving me. But as he looked at Izuku's ruined arms, the thought lingered, dark and poisonous in the back of his mind. You already do. Katsuki stared at the ceiling, tears tracking into his ears, and waited for the sun to rise on a world that felt decidedly darker than the one they had fought to save. The vow hung in the air, heavy and absolute, but the universe didn't care about teenage oaths. The universe only cared about biology. The rest of the night passed in a blur of interruptions. Nurses drifted in and out like white ghosts, checking vitals, changing 4 bags, and adjusting the drains protruding from Katsuki's chest. Every time the door opened, Katsuki's eyes snapped to it, guarding the perimeter even as his body screamed for rest. He watched them check the circulation in Izuku's purple fingertips. He watched them adjust the angle of the slings. Izuku didn't wake up. He slept the sleep of the dead, drugged and depleted, his chest hitching with every third breath. When the sun finally rose, it wasn't a triumphant golden dawn heralding the post-war era. It was a gray, watery light that filtered through the blinds, bleaching the color out of the room and highlighting the grime on the floor tiles. The profound clarity of the night, the realization of love and debt began to fade, replaced by the sharp, gritty reality of the morning. The morphine was wearing off. The adrenaline was gone. Katsuki realized then that surviving the war was the easy part. The war was just adrenaline and instinct. Peace, he discovered as the rattle of a food cart echoed down the hallway, was going to be boring, painful, and agonizingly slow. The door bumped open. The smell of cheap oats and antiseptic flooded the room. Day 4 was not defined by silence, but by the humiliating, grinding mechanics of survival. Recovery wasn't a montage. It wasn't an inspirational sequence of push-ups and sunlight. It was a series of small, devastating indignities that stripped away the myth of the pro-hero and left behind 2 broken teenagers in hospital gowns. It started with breakfast. Katsuki woke up to the sound of metal clinking against ceramic. He kept his eyes closed for a moment, cataloging his body. The chest pain had receded from a scream to a dull, constant roar, like a generator running in the background. His fingers felt less numb. He could wiggle his toes. He opened his eyes. A nurse was standing between their beds. She was young, efficient, and clearly overworked. She held a bowl of something beige and gelatinous oatmeal, probably, or some nutrient paste designed for patients who couldn't chew properly. She was trying to feed Izuku. "Open up, Midoriya-kun," she said, her voice brisk. She held the spoon out. Izuku sat propped up against the pillows. His arms were still suspended in the slings, useless white statues hovering on either side of him. He stared at the spoon like it was a villain he didn't know how to defeat. His face was flushed a deep, shameful red. I'm not hungry," Izuku mumbled, turning his head away. "You haven't eaten solid food in 4 days," the nurse countered, not unkindly, but with the exhausted patience of someone who had 20 other patients to check. "Your body needs the calories to knit those bones back together. Come on. Just a few bites." She pushed the spoon forward. It bumped against Izuku's lip. A drop of beige sludge smeared onto his chin. Izuku flinched. He looked destroyed. This was the boy who had floated in the air. This was the boy who had punched a hole in the sky. And now he was flinching away from a spoon because he couldn't wipe his own face. Katsuki felt a surge of bile rise in his throat. It was the guilt again, shape-shifting into rage. He can't do it, Katsuki realized. He literally can't lift his hand to his face. Because he broke them saving me. Stop it, Katsuki growled. The nurse jumped, turning to look at him. Bakugo-san. You're awake. How is your pain level? Forget the pain, Katsuki snapped. He pushed himself up. It felt like tearing Velcro off his skin, but he ignored it. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. Give me the bowl. Excuse me? I said give me the diamond bowl. Bakugo-san, you shouldn't be moving. You're graft. My hands work fine, Katsuki snarled. He reached out, his arm shaking slightly from weakness, but his grip firm. He hates being treated like a toddler. Give it to me. The nurse looked from Katsuki's furious, red eyes to Izuku's humiliated, averted face. She sighed, surrendering. She placed the bowl and the spoon on the rolling table and pushed it into the gap between their beds. Fine. But if your heart monitor spikes above 110, I'm calling the doctor and sedating you both. She marched out, the door clicking shut behind her. The silence returned, but now it was thick with embarrassment. Katsuki took a breath to steady his shaking hands. He reached for the bowl. He stirred the oatmeal. It looked disgusting. Kaken, Izuku whispered. You don't have to. Shut up. I can wait until my hands work. Maybe in a week. In a week you'll be dead from starvation. Katsuki scooped up a spoonful. He turned his torso, fighting the stiffness in his chest. Turn around, Deku. Slowly, reluctantly, Izuku turned his head back toward Katsuki. He looked miserable. His eyes were wet. The shame radiated off him in waves. This is pathetic, Izuku whispered. Yeah. It is, Katsuki agreed. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He leaned forward, extending the spoon. But we're alive to be pathetic. So eat. Izuku looked at the spoon. He looked at Katsuki. Katsuki's expression wasn't mocking. It was hard, focused, and terrified. He was looking at Izuku's mouth with an intensity that usually preceded an explosion. Izuku opened his mouth. Katsuki slid the spoon in. He was careful. Surprisingly careful. He didn't scrape Izuku's teeth. He waited for Izuku to swallow before pulling back. He reached out with his thumb and wiped the smear of oatmeal from Izuku's chin. The touch was electric. Izuku froze. Katsuki froze. His thumb lingered on Izuku's skin for a fraction of a second too long. It was rough, callous against the softness of Izuku's cheek. For a moment, Katsuki wasn't thinking about the war or the injuries. He was thinking about how warm Izuku was. He was thinking about how terrifyingly fragile he felt. Katsuki pulled his hand back as if he'd been burned. He focused intently on the bowl. Again, Katsuki grunted. They fell into a rhythm. Scoop. Extend. Swallow. Wipe. It was the most NTMT thing they had ever done. It was more NTMT than fighting. It was a surrender of dignity on Izuku's part, and a surrender of pride on Katsuki's. It tastes like wet cardboard, Izuku murmured after the fifth bite. It's hospital food. It's supposed to make you want to leave, Katsuki muttered. 5 more bites. Then you can stop. You're bossy even when you're half dead. Especially when I'm half dead. Someone has to keep your brain functioning. Izuku took another bite. He swallowed, then looked at Katsuki through his eyelashes. Your hand is shaking. Muscle weakness, Katsuki lied. His hand was shaking because looking at Izuku like this broken, dependent, and trusting was overloading his nervous system. Ignore it. Thank you, Kaken. Eat the DM and oatmeal. By noon, the sanctuary of the room was breached. Visiting hours. A voice roared from the hallway. Katsuki stiffened. He knew that volume. The door burst open. It wasn't just one person. It was the Vanguard Action Squad of Friendship. Kirishima, Ashido, Kaminari, Uraraka, Ida, and Todoroki squeezed into the room. They were in their school uniforms. They brought the smell of the outside world with them: fresh air, rain, convenience store snacks, and the overwhelming, vibrant energy of life that hadn't been paused. Bakugo! Midoriya! Kirishima led the charge, his eyes immediately welling up with manly tears. You guys are alive. We were so worried. Please maintain an orderly volume in a medical facility. Ida chopped the air, though his own voice was wobbling. They swarmed the beds. Katsuki instinctively leaned back, putting up his guard. He hated this. He hated being seen like this, weak, tethered to machines, wearing a gown that tied in the back. But he watched Izuku. The moment the door opened, Izuku changed. The broken boy who had cried over oatmeal vanished. In his place, a mask slid down. Guys! Izuku chirped. His voice was raspy, but he forced a brightness into it that made Katsuki's teeth ache. He smiled that classic, blinding all-might smile. I'm so glad to see you. Are you all okay? Was anyone else hurt? We're fine, Deku-kun. Uraraka rushed to his side, her hands hovering over his casted arms, afraid to touch. She looked like she was about to sob. We're fine. But look at you. Oh, this. Izuku laughed. It was a hollow, tinny sound. It looks worse than it is. Recovery girl says I just need some rest. I'll be back on my feet in no time. Liar. Katsuki gripped his bedsheet. Liar. That's a relief, Todoroki said, standing at the foot of the bed. He looked somber, his mismatched eyes scanning Izuku's injuries with analytical dread. The news reports said. They said the damage to your arms was catastrophic. The room went quiet. The elephant in the room, the loss of one for all, hung heavy in the air. The class didn't know the full secret, but they knew something had happened. The light had gone out of the world when All Might fell, and now the successor was in a hospital bed looking like a crushed doll. The news always exaggerates. Izuku waved it off, ignoring the fact that he couldn't actually move his hands. I just pushed a little too hard. You know me. Yeah, Kaminari laughed nervously. Classic Midoriya. Always breaking bones. But we won. Izuku continued, steering the conversation away from himself with the skill of a politician. Because of everyone. I heard you guys secured the evacuation routes. That saved thousands of people. He praised them. He asked about their quirks. He asked about Aizawa. He turned the spotlight outward, deflecting the pity, deflecting the truth. He was comforting them. Katsuki watched him from his bed. He saw the way Izuku's smile wavered at the corners. He saw the sweat beading on Izuku's forehead from the effort of maintaining the facade. It was disgusting. And it was heartbreaking. Bakugo! Kirishima turned to him, grinning. Well, you look alive, man. That heart injury sounded scary. It takes more than a stab wound to kill me, Katsuki grunted. He didn't smile. He didn't perform. Did you really wake up and demand food immediately? Zero asked. The nurse's station is terrified of you. They're incompetent, Katsuki muttered. They stayed for an hour. They filled the room with chatter and noise. They piled snacks on the side tables, fruit baskets, energy jellies, comics. Katsuki felt isolated. He felt like he was watching them through a thick pane of glass. They were talking about the future, about graduation, about the rebuilding efforts, about hero rankings. They didn't realize that the two people in the beds weren't part of that future anymore. Not in the way they thought. Izuku was quirkless. Katsuki was damaged goods. They were relics of the war, not the architects of the peace. We have to go, Ida announced finally, checking his watch. Visiting hours are strictly enforced, and our classmates need rest. Get well soon, Deku-kun. Uraraka squeezed Izuku's shoulder gently. Yeah. Hurry back to class. Ashido cheered. We will. Izuku promised. See you soon. They filed out. The door clicked shut. The silence crashed back into the room. It was heavier now. The contrast between the noise of life and the quiet of the hospital was jarring. Izuku's smile dropped instantly. It didn't fade, it fell. His face went slack. He slumped back against the pillows, exhaling a breath that sounded like a sob. It looked exhausted, depleted, gray. "You're a terrible liar," Katsuki said into the quiet. Izuku didn't open his eyes. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell them the whole truth. You told them you'd be back on your feet. You told them it wasn't that bad. What was I supposed to say, Kaken?" Izuku opened his eyes. They were dull again. "Was I supposed to tell Uraraka that I can't feed myself? Was I supposed to tell Ida that I'm never going to run alongside him again? Was I supposed to make them cry? They were already crying. I have to be strong for them," Izuku whispered. "I'm the symbol of peace's successor. Even if I don't have the power anymore. I can't let them see me give up." "You're not the symbol anymore," Katsuki said cruelly. He needed to break the delusion. He needed Izuku to stop pretending, because the pretending was going to kill him faster than the injuries. "You're just Izuku." Izuku flinched. "I know. So stop acting like you have to carry the sky. You can barely carry a spoon." Izuku turned his head away. A single tear tracked into the bandage on his cheek. "I don't know who I am if I'm not doing that," Izuku confessed softly. "If I'm not reassuring people. If I'm not smiling. What's left?" Katsuki looked at the boy he had chased for a lifetime. He looked at the scars. He looked at the emptiness where a quirk used to be. "What's left?" "Me," Katsuki wanted to say. "I'm left. I'm here." Isn't that enough? But he knew it wasn't. Not yet. Katsuki Bokugo wasn't a comfort, he was a reminder of the failure. He was the prize Izuku had won in a game that cost him everything. "You're alive," Katsuki said instead. "That has to be enough for now." Izuku didn't answer. He stared at the fruit basket Kirishima had left. An apple sat on top, shiny and red. "Kaken?" "What?" "I'm hungry now." It was a peace offering. A surrender. Katsuki sighed, the sound rattling his chest. He reached for the cold oatmeal. He stirred it. "Turn around, nerd." He fed him. Scoop. Extend. Swallow. Wipe. Katsuki watched Izuku's throat move as he swallowed. He watched the way his eyelashes cast shadows on his cheeks. He memorized the map of bruises on his face. "You think you're useless," Katsuki thought, the yearning burning a hole in his stomach. "You think you're empty. But you're the only thing in this room that matters." He scraped the bottom of the bowl. "Done," Katsuki muttered. "Thanks. Go to sleep. You look like a raccoon." "Okay." Izuku closed his eyes. Katsuki lay back, staring at the ceiling. He felt the phantom weight of the spoon in his hand. He felt the ghost of Izuku's skin on his thumb. The world outside was moving on. The class was graduating. The heroes were rebuilding. But in this room, time had stopped. And Katsuki knew, with a terrifying certainty, that he would stay in this stopped time for as long as Izuku needed him, even if it meant watching the rest of the world leave them behind. Weeks bled into a month. The white-walled silence of the hospital room was replaced by the grinding, mechanical noise of the rehabilitation wing. Recovery, Katsuki learned, was not a linear path. It was a divergence. For Katsuki, it was a steep, aggressive climb. His body, fueled by spite and a lifetime of durability training, knitted itself back together with terrifying speed. The graft in his heart settled into a steady, powerful rhythm. The scar tissue on his chest turned from angry red to a silvery pink. He spent his afternoons in the gym, sweating through his shirt, forcing his muscles to remember how to be weapons. For Izuku, recovery was a flat line. Katsuki sat on a bench in the corner of the physical therapy room, a towel draped over his neck, watching. Across the room, Izuku was sitting at a low table. A therapist, a woman with a patience that made Katsuki want to scream, was sitting opposite him. Between them was a small, colorful pegboard and a pile of plastic shapes. It was a toddler's toy. "Take your time, Midoriya-san," the therapist said softly. "Focus on the pincer grasp." Izuku was staring at a blue plastic square. His brow was furrowed, sweat beading on his upper lip. His arms were out of the casts now, revealing limbs that were shockingly thin, scarred with jagged, lightning bolt lines where the skin had split and healed over metal rods. His hand shook violently. He reached for the blue square. His fingers twitched, spasming, refusing to close. He pawed at it, clumsy and desperate, like a claw machine with a cut wire. He missed. The plastic square skittered across the table and fell onto the floor. Clatter. The sound was quiet, but it echoed in the gym like a gunshot. Izuku froze. He stared at his hand, his trembling, useless, scarred hand, and then he slowly lowered it to his lap. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just looked resigned. It's okay, the therapist soothed. Fatigue sets in quickly. Let's try again tomorrow. Katsuki crushed the water bottle in his hand. The plastic crumpled with a loud crack. He stood up, walking out of the gym before he did something unforgivable, like blast the pegboard into dust. He walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at himself in the mirror. He looked strong. He looked like a hero coming back from war. I am healing, Katsuki thought, the realization tasting like acid. I'm getting stronger every day. And he is learning how to hold a spoon. The disparity was sickening. It felt like theft. Every rep Katsuki finished, every breath he took without pain, felt like vitality he had stolen from the boy next door. I am the rocket, Katsuki thought bitterly, leaning his forehead against the cool glass. And he is the launch pad. Scorched. Burnt. Left behind. The day of the discharge came 6 weeks after they woke up. The room was packed. Not with friends this time, but with the logistics of separation. Inko Midoriya was there. She looked smaller than Katsuki remembered. Her eyes were permanently swollen, rimmed with red. She moved around the room like a nervous bird, packing Izuku's few belongings into a duffel bag. Do you have the prescriptions, Izuku? She asked, her voice trembling. The nerve blockers? The painkillers? Yes, Mom, Izuku said. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed in civilian clothes, a soft green sweater and loose pants. He looked soft. Harmless. Katsuki was standing by the window. He was in his UA uniform. It fit perfectly. He had polished his buttons. He had tied his tie. He was the picture of the elite. The contrast between them was now physical, sartorial, and absolute. Izawa entered. Through. He walked with a cane now, his leg a permanent casualty of the war, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. Bakugo, Izawa grunted. The car is waiting. We're heading back to the dorms. Yeah, Katsuki said. He didn't move. Izawa looked at Izuku. His expression softened, just a fraction. Midoriya. Take care of yourself. The school. The doors are open. When you're ready for general studies. Thank you, Sensei, Izuku smiled. It was that fake, plastic smile again. I'll think about it. Right now, I think Mom just wants me home. Understood. Izawa turned to the door. Bakugo. 5 minutes. The door clicked shut. Inko excused herself to sign the final paperwork, sensing the gravity in the air. They were alone. The silence that had defined their hospital stay returned for one final encore. But this time, it wasn't the silence of shared survival. It was the silence of a fork in the road. Katsuki walked over to Izuku's bed. He stood there, looking down. So, Katsuki said. Eloquent. So, Izuku echoed. He looked up. He didn't try to stand. He knew he couldn't do it without help yet. You're going back. Yeah. The hero rankings are a mess, Izuku said, rambling slightly. With Endeavor retired and Hawks grounded. The spots are open. Best Genist is holding number 1, but he needs a strong number 2. You're going to shoot up the charts, Kaken. You'll probably be top 10 by graduation. He was doing it again. Analyzing. Cheerleading. Pushing Katsuki into the light while sitting in the dark. Stop it, Katsuki said. Stop what? Stop acting like you're watching me on TV. I'm right here. Izuku's mouth clicked shut. He looked down at his hands, resting limp in his lap. For now, Izuku whispered. But you're going back to UA. You're going to be a pro. And I'm going to. Physical therapy. To learn how to pick up a pencil. He looked up, and his eyes were dry, but they were filled with a terrifying clarity. We aren't running the same race anymore, Kaken. You crossed the finish line. I tripped. Katsuki felt the rage boil up hot, defensive, irrational. He wanted to grab Izuku by the shoulders. He wanted to shake him. He wanted to scream, "We are a set. We are the Wonder Duo. You don't get to quit." But then he looked at the scars on Izuku's arms. He looked at the emptiness where the quirk used to be. He realized the truth. It was a cold, brutal epiphany that settled in his gut like a stone. I hurt him. Not just in the past. Not just the bullying. Katsuki hurt him now. Just by standing here. Just by wearing this uniform. Just by existing as a powerful, healthy, rising star. Every time Izuku looked at Katsuki, he saw what he had lost. Every time Katsuki succeeded, it would be a reminder of the price Izuku paid. Katsuki was a walking, breathing monument to Izuku's sacrifice. And if he stayed close, if he kept hovering, kept feeding him, kept playing the guilty caretaker, he would just be twisting the knife. He would be forcing Izuku to live in the shadow of the hero he used to be. I have to go, Katsuki realized. The thought made him feel like his heart was tearing open again. I have to get away from him. I have to let him heal without me looming over him like a vulture. It was the most painful decision of his life. It hurt more than the stab wound. "Deku," Katsuki said. His voice was steady. Cold. He armored himself in the old persona, because it was the only way he could do this without breaking down. "Yeah. Don't expect me to visit." Izuku flinched. It was a small, physical JRK, as if he'd been slapped. "What?" "I'm going to be busy," Katsuki lied. He forced a scowl onto his face. "Third year is intense. The provisional license work, the rebuilding the agency offers. I won't have time to come play nurse." He saw the light go out in Izuku's eyes. He saw the rejection land. "Oh," Izuku whispered. "Of course. You need to focus on being number one." "Exactly," Katsuki said. He turned away. He couldn't look at him anymore. If he looked, he would stay. "You saved me to be a hero, right? So let me go be one." Izuku's voice cracked. "I did." "Then we're done here." Katsuki grabbed his bag. He walked to the door. Every step was a battle against his own instincts. His body screamed to turn around. His heart screamed to go back, to kneel by the bed, to promise forever. But he kept walking. He put his hand on the doorknob. "Kaken." Katsuki froze. He didn't turn. "What?" "Win," Izuku whispered. It sounded like a goodbye. "Win for both of us." Katsuki gritted his teeth so hard he thought they might shatter. "I always do," he choked out. He opened the door and walked out. He walked past Inko, who was returning with the paperwork. He walked past Aizawa. He walked straight to the waiting car, threw his bag in the back, and got in. He didn't look back at the window. As the car pulled away, distancing him from the hospital, distancing him from the boy who had given him his life, Katsuki Bakugo finally let the mask fall. He slumped against the seat, put his head in his hands, and shattered. 2 years later, the billboard was 50 feet tall. It illuminated the rainy intersection of Shibuya with blinding, high-definition light. It showed a man a hero suspended in midair, surrounded by smoke and orange sparks. His mask was sharp, his eyes glowing white, his gauntlets gleaming. Dynamite, the unstoppable force. Agency opening soon. Izuku Midoriya stood on the sidewalk, looking up. The rain dripped off the rim of his umbrella, soaking the shoulder of his cheap suit jacket. He shifted his grip on the handle of his briefcase. His hands worked better now. He could hold things, he could type, he could dress himself, but they ached in the damp weather. A deep, bone-deep ache that never really went away. "Midoriya-sensei." A voice called out from behind him. Izuku turned. A group of students from the UA General Studies Department were running toward the station, laughing. "You're gonna miss the train, sensei," one of them shouted. "I'm coming." Izuku called back, forcing a smile onto his face. It was easier now. The mask had fused to his skin. He looked back at the billboard one last time. He hadn't seen Kaken in 2 years. Not really. He had seen him on TV. He had seen him in magazines. He had seen him giving terse, angry interviews about collateral damage reduction. He had seen him climbing the ranks, passing Mirko, passing Kamui Woods, settling violently into the number 2 spot right behind Genist. But he hadn't seen him. Kakin had kept his word. He had been busy. He hadn't visited. He hadn't called. Izuku watched the digital image of Dynamite blast a villain into SBM's. He looked strong, Izuku thought, a familiar, bittersweet cocktail of pride and loneliness swirling in his chest. He looks amazing. He looks like he doesn't need me. Izuku tightened his grip on the umbrella, ignoring the twinge of pain in his scarred fingers. Win for both of us, Izuku whispered to the giant, glowing screen. He turned and walked toward the station, merging into the sea of commuters. He was just a face in the crowd now. A civilian. A teacher. A footnote in the origin story of the great explosion murder god. From the roof of a skyscraper 3 blocks away, a figure watched. Katsuki lowered the binoculars. The rain pounded against his costume, steaming off the heated palms of his gauntlets. He watched the green umbrella bob through the crowd, disappearing into the station entrance. Dynamite, his earpiece crackled. We have a robbery in progress in District U, copy? Copy, Katsuki growled. I'm on it. He didn't move immediately. He stared at the spot where the green umbrella had vanished. He came here every Tuesday. Every single Tuesday night, he stood on this roof, in the rain, in the cold, just to watch Izuku walk from the school to the station. It was pathetic. It was stalkerish. It was the only thing keeping him sane. He saw the way Izuku rubbed his right hand when it got cold. He saw the way he paused to look at the billboard. He looked, Katsuki thought, his heart thumping a heavy, painful rhythm against his ribs. He still looks. The yearning was a physical hunger. It clawed at his throat. He wanted to jump down. He wanted to land in front of him. He wanted to ask him if the nerve pain was bad today. He wanted to ask him if he was happy teaching the extras. But he couldn't. Because Izuku was walking. He was working. He was living. He wasn't crying in a hospital bed. He had built a life, a small, quiet, safe life. And Katsuki was violence. He was danger. He was the target on the back of society. If he went down there, he would just bring the war back to Izuku's doorstep. I'm doing this for you, Katsuki whispered to the rain, repeating the mantra he had used for 730 days. I'm staying away for you. But as he turned and launched himself into the night, propelling himself toward the violence with a deafening boom, the lie tasted like ash in his mouth. He wasn't staying away for Izuku. Not anymore. He was staying away because he was terrified that if he got close enough to see the emptiness in Izuku's eyes again, he would shatter into a million pieces and never be able to put himself back together. He was the number 2 hero. He was invincible. And he was the loneliest man in the world. Time didn't heal wounds, it just calcified them. The seasons turned. The cherry blossoms fell, the humidity of summer choked the asphalt, the leaves turned brown, and the snow buried the city. Then it happened all over again. For Katsuki Bakugo, life became a series of violent statistics. Arrest rates. Collateral damage percentages. Approval ratings. He climbed the hero billboard chart with a terrifying, singular focus. He moved into a high-rise apartment that looked like a showroom: glass, steel, black leather, and absolutely no personal touches. He didn't need a home, he needed a charging station. He lived for the Tuesday nights on the rooftop. It was his only religion. He tracked Izuku's life through the lens of binoculars and police reports. He knew that Izuku had started wearing reading glasses. He knew that Izuku struggled to hold an umbrella in the wind. He knew that Izuku stopped buying katsudon because he couldn't manage the chopsticks anymore. Katsuki stopped eating katsudon, too. It felt like a betrayal to enjoy it. For Izuku Midoriya, life became a quiet, small thing. He graded papers. He taught general studies students that heroism wasn't just about punching. He learned to type with 2 fingers. He learned to ask strangers to open water bottles for him on the train, swallowing his pride every single time. He lived for the news alerts on his phone. Dynamite. Every time the name popped up, Izuku's heart would stop until he confirmed Katsuki wasn't dead. He analyzed the footage. He noticed the way Katsuki favored his left side. He noticed the new scar on Katsuki's neck. He noticed that Katsuki never smiled in interviews anymore. They orbited each other like two stars in a binary system, locked together by the gravity of their shared trauma, but terrified that if they touched, they would go supernova and destroy everything all over again. They were waiting. They didn't know what for, maybe for the guilt to fade, maybe for the world to end again. The invitation sat on Katsuki's desk like a summons to an execution. It was a piece of heavy, cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing, innocent enough to anyone else. Class 1A reunion, 3 years post-graduation. But to Katsuki, it radiated a radioactive heat. He sat in his office at the Dynamite Agency, the city lights of Mizudafu sprawling below him through the floor-to-ceiling glass. The office was a reflection of his current mental state, sterile, sharp-edged, chrome and black leather. There were no photos, no plants, no soft edges. It was a machine for working just like him. "You're going," Kirishima said from the doorway, breaking the silence. Katsuki didn't look up from the villain apprehension report he was pretending to read. "I have patrol." "You switched shifts with Zero." "I checked the logs." Kirishima walked in, his footsteps muted by the expensive carpet. He leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "You haven't gone to a single one, Bakugo. Not the first year. Not the second. People are starting to think you're better than them." "I am better than them," Katsuki muttered, the old reflex firing without heat. "You're avoiding him." The pen in Katsuki's hand snapped. Ink black and viscous bled onto his thumb, staining the skin like a bruise. Katsuki stared at the ink. He didn't wipe it off. "I'm not avoiding anyone," he lied. "I'm busy keeping this city from eating itself." "He asks about you, you know?" Katsuki's breath hitched. A traitorous, painful thump slammed against his ribs, right where the graft scar sat. "He does. Every time," Kirishima sighed, his voice dropping to a tone of frustrated pity. "Is Kaken eating? Is he sleeping? Is his shoulder bothering him in the rain? He worries about you, even after everything." Katsuki closed his eyes. The image of Izuku civilian, scarred, gentle Izuku worrying about him, the number 2 hero, was nauseating. It was a reversal of the natural order. Katsuki was supposed to be the protector. Izuku was supposed to be the one who was safe. "He shouldn't," Katsuki rasped. "He should forget I exist." "Well, he hasn't. And he's bringing a box of letters for you tonight. Fan mail from his students. He said he wanted to give them to you personally." Katsuki froze. He imagined the scene. Izuku standing in a bar, holding a cardboard box, waiting for a ghost who never showed up. He imagined the disappointment settling into those green eyes, not anger, never anger, just that quiet, crushing resignation. Katsuki couldn't be the reason for that look again. He had caused enough of them to last a lifetime. "What time?" Katsuki grunted, wiping the ink from his hand. 7. Wear something nice. And try to look less like you're going to a funeral. The Sky Lounge was a sensory nightmare. It was designed for the elite dim amber lighting, jazz music that drifted through the air like smoke, the clinking of expensive crystal. To the rest of the world, it was luxury. To Katsuki, it was noise. He stood near the back wall, holding a glass of whiskey he would never drink, using it as a prop to keep people away. He felt like a weapon that had been brought to a dinner party, heavy, dangerous, and fundamentally out of place. The room was full of ghosts. Uraraka was there, laughing with Azui. Todoroki was nodding solemnly at something Yaoyorozu was saying. They shone. They were the golden generation, whole and happy and moving forward. Katsuki felt the phantom ache in his chest. He wasn't part of them. He was a relic of the war, a man held together by spite and surgery, pretending he wasn't hollowed out. And then the door opened. Katsuki didn't need to look. He felt it. The atmosphere in the room bent. It was a gravitational shift, a sudden reorientation of every atom in the space. The air grew thinner. The lights seemed to dim, casting the spotlight on the figure in the doorway. Izuku Midoriya walked in. He wasn't wearing a costume. He wasn't wearing armor. He was wearing a slightly rumpled navy blazer, a white button-down and beige slacks. He wore thick-rimmed glasses now, framing eyes that squinted slightly against the low light. He looked small. He looked breakable. But he was the sun. Deku-kun. Midoriya. The heroes swarmed him. They gravitated toward him instinctively, moths seeking the only warmth in the room. Even without a quirk, even stripped of his power, Izuku possessed a charisma that Katsuki with all his strength and rankings could never replicate. Katsuki stayed in the shadows. He watched with a hunger that scared him. He catalogued every change. The gray hairs starting to appear at Izuku's temples, stress. The way he leaned slightly to the left when he stood, hip pain. The way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes until Uraraka hugged him. And then Katsuki saw the gloves. They were black, sleek, fingerless compression gloves. To a stranger, they looked like a fashion choice. To Katsuki, they were a scream. They were hiding the jagged, keloid scars that ran from Izuku's knuckles to his elbows. They were holding the shattered structure of his hands together. When Izuku hugged Uraraka, he didn't squeeze. He just leaned. His hands hovered flat against her back. He can't grip, Katsuki realized. The thought was a physical blow, sharper than a knife. He still can't grip. The guilt washed over him, cold and suffocating. I did that. My life cost him his hands. My heart beats because his hands broke. Go say hi, Kirishima nudged him, breaking the trance. I can't, Katsuki whispered. You're pathetic. Go. Kirishima shoved him. Katsuki stumbled forward, breaching the perimeter. He stepped into the light. The chatter died. The circle parted. Izuku turned. For 1 second, one glorious, agonizing second, Katsuki saw the mask slip. He saw Izuku's eyes widen. He saw a flash of raw, desperate hunger that mirrored his own. He saw Izuku's body sway toward him, a compass needle finding north. But then reality crashed in. The trauma response took over. Izuku straightened. The polite, civilian mask slid into place like a steel shutter. Kaken, Izuku said. His voice was warm, but it was the warmth of a stranger. You came. Kirishima wouldn't shut up, Katsuki grunted. He shoved his hands deep into his pockets so Izuku wouldn't see them shaking. Those glasses make you look like a grandpa. It was a weak jab. A reflex. Izuku laughed, but it was a soft, breathy sound. And you look expensive. That suit probably costs more than my rent. Probably. They stood there, 2 feet apart. It might as well have been 2 light years. How is the agency? Izuku asked. Small talk. The killer of souls. Busy. Top of the charts, Katsuki said. He hated the way it sounded arrogant, boastful. Look at me, look at the hero I am while you grade papers. He wanted to scream, it means nothing. None of it means anything if you aren't there. I know, Izuku smiled. I tracked the stats. Your collateral damage is down 4%. My students. They analyze your fights in class. You still tracking stats? Old habits. Izuku reached for a glass of ginger ale on the table behind him. Katsuki watched the movement in slow motion. Izuku's hand trembled. He didn't grab the glass. He couldn't curl his fingers around it. Instead, he scooped it, wedging the glass between his palms, lifting it with his wrists like a child holding a heavy mug. It was clumsy. It was a struggle. Panic flared in Katsuki's chest. A primal instinct to help, to fix, to save. He stepped forward. He reached out. Let me. Izuku flinched. It was a violent, visceral reaction. He jerked the glass back, splashing ginger ale onto his wrist. His eyes went wide with panic. He looked at Katsuki's hand reaching for him not as a helping gesture, but as a threat. Don't touch me. The message was loud and clear in his eyes. Don't look at it. Don't pity me. Katsuki froze. The rejection hit him like a physical slap. It confirmed his worst nightmare. He's afraid of me, Katsuki thought, the self-loathing curdling in his gut. Or he's ashamed. Either way, I am the last person he wants help from. I am the cause of the tremor, not the cure. Katsuki slowly, agonizingly, lowered his hand. He felt like he was retracting a claw. Don't drop it, Katsuki said, his voice rough and unrecognizable. You'll make a mess. I won't, Izuku whispered, staring at the... I'm fine. The silence was excruciating. It was the silence of two people screaming behind soundproof glass. Midoriya. The voice broke the tension. Todoroki Shoto stepped into the circle. I wanted to ask you about the quirk singularity paper you published, Todoroki said, completely oblivious to the tragedy unfolding in front of him. The data on vestigial accumulation was fascinating. Izuku turned away from Katsuki instantly. The relief on his face was palpable. He looked like a man being rescued from a burning building. Oh, Shoto. Yes. Izuku's voice pitched up, becoming animated. I was worried it was too theoretical, but... He turned his back on Katsuki. Katsuki stood there, dismissed. Forgotten. He watched them. He watched Todoroki lean in close to hear Izuku over the jazz music. He watched Todoroki nod, his face open and engaged. He saw Todoroki place a hand on Izuku's shoulder, a gentle, easy, possessive touch. Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He leaned into the touch. He smiled up at Todoroki, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The jealousy hit Katsuki with the force of a train wreck. It wasn't a hot, fiery rage. It was a cold, sick feeling that started in his stomach and spread to his fingertips. It was the feeling of being replaced. That should be me, the voice in Katsuki's head howled. I should be the one listening to his nerd theories. I should be the one touching his shoulder. I should be the anchor. But Todoroki was safe. Todoroki was whole. Todoroki hadn't broken Izuku. Katsuki looked at his own hands. They were weapons. They created explosions. They destroyed. Todoroki could offer ice. He could offer cooling. He could offer peace. I have no right to be jealous, Katsuki realized, the thought tasting like ash. I gave up my spot. I walked out of that hospital room. I created this vacuum, and now someone else is filling it. He looks happy, Uraraka said softly, appearing at his elbow. Katsuki looked down. He wanted to tell her to shut up. He wanted to shatter his glass against the wall. He smiles for real now, she continued, watching Izuku. He struggled for a long time. But he found a purpose. He found people who value him for his mind, not his sacrifice. People who aren't me. You stayed away, she said. He didn't need me looming over him, Katsuki rasped, his throat tight. I'm the war-round face. Every time he looks at me, he remembers the blood. He remembers what he lost. Is that what he thinks? Uraraka asked quietly. Or is that what you tell yourself so you don't have to face the guilt? Katsuki didn't answer. He couldn't. He looked back at Izuku one last time. Izuku was laughing now, his head thrown back, exposing the pale column of his throat. He looked radiant. He looked complete. And Katsuki was standing 5 feet away, freezing to death. The loneliness wasn't a room he sat in, it was the skin he wore. It was tight and suffocating and he couldn't take it off. I have to go, Katsuki muttered. But Kugo, you just got here. I can't be here. He turned and walked away. He didn't say goodbye to Kirishima. He didn't say goodbye to the ghosts. He reached the door. His hand shook as he pushed it open. Kaken. Katsuki stopped. His heart slammed against his ribs. Don't turn around. If you turn around, you'll never leave. Turned. Izuku had broken away from the group. He stood a few feet away, clutching his ginger ale with both hands to keep it steady. He looked concerned. You're leaving? Izuku asked. Work, Katsuki lied. Villains don't sleep. Oh, okay. Izuku bit his lip. He looked down. The letters. From my students. Right. I left them in the coat check. Box 42. Okay. They really look up to you, Kaken. You're their hero. Izuku looked up. His eyes were soft, sad, and filled with a longing that mirrored Katsuki's own, though Katsuki was too blind with self-hatred to see it. You're a great hero, Izuku whispered. But not yours, Katsuki thought. Never yours again. Take care of yourself, Deku, Katsuki said. His voice was thick with all the things he couldn't say. I love you. I miss you. I'm sorry. You too. Katsuki pushed the door open and stepped out into the night. He retrieved the box from the coat check. It was a shoebox, decorated with glitter and marker drawings of explosions. It was heavy with the adoration of children he would never meet. Katsuki walked to the alley beside the bar. He couldn't make it to the agency. He couldn't make it to his apartment. He leaned against the damp brick wall. He slid down until he was sitting on the dirty pavement, his expensive suit ruining in the grime. He pulled his knees to his chest and hugged the shoebox. He squeezed his eyes shut, but he could still see it. Izuku's smile directed at Todoroki. Izuku's flinch directed at him. Katsuki Bakugo, the man who won every fight, sat in the alley and realized he had lost the only thing that mattered. He was the strongest hero in the world, and he couldn't even hold a glass of ginger ale for the boy he loved. He stayed there for an hour, listening to the muffled jazz music through the wall, shivering in the cold, waiting for a dawn that felt like it would never come. The shoebox sat on the glass coffee table of Katsuki's apartment like a bomb that had failed to detonate. For 3 days he didn't touch it. He walked around it. He glared at it while he drank his morning coffee. It was a cardboard intruder in his pristine, monochrome life. On the 4th night, unable to sleep, he opened it. It was full of folded notebook paper, crayon drawings, and messy kanji. Dear Dynamite, you are so strong. I want to explode things too. Katsuki sat on his floor at 3 a.m., reading every single one. He didn't read them for the praise. He read them because he was looking for traces of their teacher. He found them. In the way a student analyzed a villain takedown, Sensei said you pivoted your center of gravity. In the way another kid mentioned safety, Sensei says checking the perimeter is the coolest part of being a hero. Izuku was in the ink. He was in the lessons. Even stripped of his power, he was molding the next generation, teaching them to love the man who had left him behind. Katsuki found a sticky note attached to the bottom of the box. Just a small, yellow square with Izuku's handwriting jagged now, less fluid than it used to be. Box 4 of District 4 Elementary. Handled with care. Katsuki ran his thumb over the ink. The handwriting was shaky. The ink handled, trailed off. He struggled to write this. Katsuki realized, his chest aching. He sat there, hand trembling, writing a note to me, while I was busy ignoring him. The reunion hadn't fixed anything. It had broken the stasis. Before the bar, Katsuki could pretend that Izuku was a distant concept, a star in the sky. But now he had seen him close up. He had seen the gray hairs. He had seen the tremors. He had smelled the ginger ale and the cheap soap. The orbit was wobbling. The gravity was getting too strong. For the next 10 days, Katsuki was a terror at the agency. He snapped at Burnin. He nearly blew up the break room microwave. He patrolled with a ferocity that bordered on reckless, trying to outrun the image of Todoroki's hand on Izuku's shoulder. He checked his phone 100 times a day, staring at the contact named Deku that he hadn't used in 2 years. Call him, his brain screamed. Just call him. And say what? His guilt answered. I'm sorry, I'm a coward? He needed a sign. He needed a reason to break the silence that wasn't just his own selfish need. He didn't get a sign. He got a siren. It was Tuesday, the day he usually watched Izuku walk to the train. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with unfallen rain, and the air pressure in the city was dropping fast. Katsuki was in the gym, punishing the bench press, when the red lights flashed. The collapse of the Takoba Commercial Center wasn't an explosion. It was a sigh. One moment, the 40-story glass needle was standing against the gray sky of District. The next, a structural groan echoed through the streets, a sound like a whale dying, and the building simply sat down. That was the first enemy. A tidal wave of pulverized concrete and drywall rolled through the streets, turning the Tuesday afternoon into a choking, blinding twilight. Katsuki landed in the center of the chaos. Perimeter! He roared into his comms, his voice cutting through the screams of civilians. Riot, secure the north side. Burnin, manage the fires on the lower levels. I'm going for the stabilizers. He was moving on pure instinct. The world was gray, coated in a thick layer of grit that tasted like copper. He blasted through the haze, his explosions acting as propulsion and jackhammers, clearing debris to create escape routes for the trapped office workers. He was efficient. He was perfect. He was a machine built for saving lives. But in the back of his mind, a ticker tape was running. District 3 blocks from the station. 2 blocks from the elementary school. Where is he? Katsuki scanned the crowd as he worked. He looked for green hair. He looked for a beige cardigan. He looked for the one person who mattered. Dynamite. The West Wing is shearing off. Vernon screamed over the channel. There are people on the 4th floor. I see them. Katsuki turned midair. He saw the structure buckling. A massive slab of concrete was hanging by rebar threads, threatening to crush a daycare center below. He didn't think. He didn't calculate the odds. He launched himself under the falling slab. He braced his feet against the crumbling floor. He aimed his gauntlets upward. He shot. Support. He unleashed a continuous, focused blast, creating a column of pressure to hold the falling ceiling in place. It was agonizing. The recoil rattled his bones. His reconstructed heart hammered a frantic, terrified rhythm against his ribs. Get them out. Katsuki screamed, sweat stinging his eyes. Move. Heroes and firefighters scrambled, pulling children and teachers from the void. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. His arms were screaming. The heat from his palms was searing his own skin. Clear. The floor is clear. Katsuki cut the power. He tried to propel himself backward, to escape the collapse he had delayed. He was too slow. The building groaned one last time. The rebar snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The sky went black. The darkness was absolute. Katsuki woke up to the sound of his own breathing. It was wet, ragged, and loud in the confined space. He tried to move. He couldn't. He was pinned. A slab of concrete was pressing down on his legs. His left arm was trapped at an awkward angle behind him. His right arm, his dominant hand, was free, but there was nowhere to move it. He was in a pocket, a small, triangular void created by 2 fallen beams. Status, he rasped. His HUD flickered. Warning. Suit integrity critical. Oxygen levels, 40%. Comlink, offline. Great, he muttered. Just great. He tried to detonate a small explosion to signal his location, but the moment he sparked his sweat, the air around him grew instantly hot and thin. No ventilation, he realized, panic flaring in his gut. If I explode, I burn up the oxygen. I suffocate. He was buried alive. The pain started to register then. His legs were numb, bad sign. His heart was throbbing, a deep, structural ache that felt like the graft was tearing away from the muscle. He closed his eyes. So this is it, he thought. This is how the number 2 hero dies. Not in a blaze of glory fighting a demon lord, but crushed under a paperwork factory in district. It was underwhelming. Time lost its meaning. It could have been minutes or hours. The air grew stale. His head grew light. The hallucinations started. At first, it was just lights. Flashes of color in the dark. Then auditory. He heard All Might laughing. He heard his mother yelling. Then he heard him. Kaken. Katsuki opened his eyes. Izuku was sitting in the corner of the small, dark pocket. He was glowing faintly, illuminated by a light source that didn't exist. He wasn't the scarred, civilian Izuku. He was the middle school Izuku. The one with the yellow backpack and the red shoes. You're not real, Katsuki whispered. Does it matter? The phantom Izuku asked. He hugged his knees. You're dying, Kaken. I know. You never told him. Katsuki laughed. It turned into a cough that rattled his lungs. Told who? The real you? Why would I? Because you're scared, the phantom said. You think you're protecting him. But you're just protecting yourself. I hurt him enough, Katsuki rasped. The darkness was pressing in on his chest, heavier than the concrete. I took his dream. I took his arms. I'm not gonna take his peace too. Is he at peace? Katsuki closed his eyes. He saw the image of Izuku at the reunion. The flinch. The shaking hands holding the ginger ale. The smile directed at Todoroki. He's moving on, Katsuki whispered. He's happy without me. You don't know that. You never asked. I couldn't. Katsuki felt a tear track through the dust on his face. Fast. And he said he hated me. I would have died right then. At least this way. I die hoping. The air was getting thinner. Black spots danced in his vision. I loved you, Katsuki whispered to the hallucination. I loved you my whole life. Since the river. Since the logs. I was too stupid to know what to do with it. The phantom Izuku smiled. It was a sad, gentle smile. I know, Kaken. Katsuki's consciousness began to drift. He felt his heart slowing down. The graft was failing. The battery was dying. I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm sorry I broke the promise. I didn't win. He let go. The darkness swallowed him. Blinding, searing white light. Katsuki gasped, his body jerking violently. He's alive. We got a pulse. The weight was gone. The concrete had been lifted. Cool, wet air rushed into his lungs, tasting of rain and dust. Bakugo! Can you hear me? Kirishima's face swam into view. He was covered in grime, his hardening activated, tears streaming down his face. Shitty. Hair. Katsuki croaked. You idiot. You scared the hell out of us. Kirishima sobbed, grabbing Katsuki's shoulder. Medics! Get the stretcher! Katsuki was hoisted up. The movement was agony. His legs screamed as blood rushed back into crushed vessels. He was carried out of the rubble, blinking against the floodlights that had been set up around the perimeter. It was night. Chapter text. Blinding, searing white light tore through the darkness, shattering the hallucination of the middle school classroom. Katsuki gasped, his body jerking violently as fresh oxygen rushed into his starved lungs. It tasted like wet concrete and rain. He's alive. We got a pulse. The crushing weight on his legs vanished. The silence was replaced by a deafening roar of drills, sirens, and shouting. Bakugo! Can you hear me? A face swam into view above him, backlit by harsh floodlights. It was Kirishima. He was covered in grime, his unbreakable form jagged and chipped, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. Shitty. Hair. Katsuki croaked, the sound scraping his throat like glass. You idiot. You scared the hell out of us. Kirishima sobbed, gripping Katsuki's shoulder with a strength that grounded him back in reality. Medics! Get the stretcher. We're clear. Katsuki was hoisted up. The movement was pure agony. His legs screamed as blood rushed back into crushed vessels, a white-hot fire that nearly made him black out again. He was carried out of the rubble, blinking against the assault of the floodlights. It was night. He had been buried for hours. The rain was still falling, cooling his feverish skin. They laid him on a gurney. Paramedics swarmed him instantly, scissors snipping through the ruins of his hero costume, checking vitals, shouting numbers. The world was a blur of noise and pain. Katsuki tried to focus, tried to find a familiar anchor in the storm. And then, a voice cut through the chaos like a signal flare. Kaken! It wasn't the polite, measured voice from the Sky Lounge. It wasn't the voice of Midoriya-sensei. It was a raw, terrified scream that cracked in the middle. Katsuki turned his head against the stiff neck brace the paramedics had just applied. Izuku broke through the police line. He was wearing his work clothes, cheap slacks, and a dress shirt that was soaked through with rain and sweat. He was missing a shoe. He was sprinting across the debris field, scrambling over slabs of concrete, slipping in the mud, shoving past a police officer who tried to stop him. Let him through. Kirishima barked at the cops. That's family. Izuku reached the stretcher. He collapsed against the side rail, his hands hovering over Katsuki's body, shaking so violently they were blurring. Kaken, Izuku gasped, his face pale as a sheet. Oh God, the crush syndrome. Is his heart beating? Is the rhythm stable? He turned on the paramedic, his eyes wild. BP is dropping, but stable, the medic reported, startled by the civilian's intensity. We need to move. Now. I'm coming, Izuku said. It wasn't a request. Sir, family only. I said I'm coming. Izuku roared. It was a flash of the old Deku, the one who stared down muscular, the one who broke his bones without flinching. The sheer force of his will silence the paramedic. Izuku grabbed the side of the stretcher. He couldn't grip the metal rail, his fingers wouldn't curl that tight, so he hooked his wrists over the bar, using his forearms to help shove the gurney toward the ambulance. Katsuki watched him through half-lidded eyes. He watched the rain plastering Izuku's hair to his forehead. He watched the terror etched into every line of his face. He's not happy, Katsuki thought, his brain moving through a sludge of pain and shock. He looked happy at the bar. But right now, he looks like he's watching the world end. They loaded Katsuki into the back. Izuku climbed in after him, sitting on the bench, his knees knocking against the stretcher. The doors slammed shut. The siren wailed. "Kaken," Izuku whispered. He reached out, then pulled back, as if afraid Katsuki would shatter. "Can you hear me?" "Loud and clear," Katsuki croaked. Screaming. Izuku let out a wet, choked laugh. Tears spilled over his lashes. "I thought, when I saw the news, the building, I thought you were gone." "Almost," Katsuki murmured. "Saw ghosts." Izuku froze. "Ghosts?" "Saw you," Katsuki slurred, the adrenaline fading, replaced by the heavy pull of exhaustion. "Middle school you." Told him. "Secrets." "What secrets?" Katsuki's eyes fluttered shut. The darkness was coming back, but it wasn't scary this time. Because he could hear Izuku breathing. "Don't worry about it," Katsuki whispered. "Just hallucinations." He drifted off before he could see the way Izuku leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the metal rail of the stretcher, weeping silently into his scarred hands. The hospital room was different this time. It wasn't the massive, shared trauma ward of the post-war days. It was a private room in the VIP wing, reserved for top 10 heroes. It had a window overlooking the city, a television, and a chair that turned into a bed. Katsuki woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the glass. He knew exactly where he was. He knew exactly what had happened. His legs throbbed with a deep, bruising ache, and his chest felt tight, but he was alive. He turned his head. Izuku was sitting in the chair. He was asleep. He was curled up in a ball, his head resting on his knees. He was still wearing his dirty, wet work clothes. His glasses were askew. It looked uncomfortable, exhausted, and unmistakably permanent. Katsuki watched him. The yearning that had been a dull ache for 2 years sharpened into a knife point. He stayed, Katsuki thought. He didn't just visit. He rode in the ambulance. He waited. Katsuki shifted, trying to sit up. The bed creaked. Izuku snapped awake. "Kaken!" He scrambled up, his glasses falling off his nose. He fumbled for them, his stiff fingers struggling to grip the frames. He finally shoved them onto his face and rushed to the bedside. "Don't move. The doctor said your legs have severe soft tissue damage. And your heart. The stress caused an arrhythmia. You need to rest." "I'm fine," Katsuki grunted, though he stopped trying to sit up. "Water." Izuku grabbed the pitcher. He poured a cup. Katsuki watched the process. Izuku used both hands to lift the pitcher, clamping it between his palms. He spilled a little water on the tray. He bit his lip in frustration, but he managed to pour the cup and bring the straw to Katsuki's lips. Katsuki drank. The water was cold and clean. "Thanks," Katsuki muttered. "Kirishima was here," Izuku said, setting the cup down. "And Burnin. The agency is handling the PR. The civilians all made it out. You saved everyone, Kaken. Except myself. Sloppy. You held a building up," Izuku said softly. "It wasn't sloppy. It was incredible." He looked at Katsuki with those wide, green eyes. The mask from the bar was gone. There was no polite distance now. There was just relief, raw and shivering. "Why are you here?" Katsuki asked. The question came out harsher than he intended. Izuku flinched. They called me. I'm your emergency contact." Katsuki froze. "Ha! On your medical file," Izuku explained, looking down at his hands. "From the war. You never changed it. The hospital called me first." Katsuki stared at the ceiling. "I never changed it." Of course he hadn't. He hadn't changed his contact. He hadn't changed his beneficiary. In his mind, everything he had still belonged to Izuku, even if Izuku didn't want it. You should go home, Katsuki said. You have work. Students. I took a leave, Izuku said. A few days. I don't need a babysitter. I'll be discharged tomorrow. And then what? Izuku asked. His voice hardened slightly. Then I go home. To your empty apartment? Izuku crossed his arms or tried to. His elbows bumped his ribs awkwardly. With crushed legs? Who's going to help you up the stairs? Who's going to make you food? You can't stand for long PRDs. I'll figure it out. I'm rich. I'll hire a nurse. No. Katsuki looked at him. No. I'm not letting a stranger take care of you, Izuku said firmly. Not after. Not with the heart thing. You need someone who knows the signs. Someone who knows what to do if the graft rejects. And that's you. It's me. Izuku took a breath. He stepped closer to the bed. He looked terrified, but he didn't back down. You took care of me, Izuku whispered. In the hospital. When I couldn't eat. When I couldn't move. You fed me. You stayed. Katsuki looked away. That was different. I owed you. I don't care about debts. Izuku's voice rose. I care about you. You're hurt, Kaken. And you're alone. And I'm. He swallowed hard. I'm tired of watching you from far away, Izuku confessed. The words hung in the air, heavy and fragile. Katsuki's heart skipped a beat. Beep. So, Izuku squared his shoulders. You're coming with me. With you. To my apartment. It's small, but it has an elevator. And a guest room. And I work from home on Fridays. Deku. I'm not asking you, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice trembling but his eyes fierce. I'm telling you. You're coming home with me. Katsuki looked at the determined set of Izuku's jaw. He looked at the scarred hands clenched into imperfect fists at his sides. He realized he had lost this fight before it even started. And God help him, he didn't want to win. Fine, Katsuki grunted. But if your bed is I'm suing. The logistics of the move were humiliating. Katsuki was discharged the next afternoon. He was given a pair of crutches and a strict regimen of painkillers. He couldn't drive. He couldn't walk far. Izuku called a taxi. They rode in silence to District. Katsuki watched the city roll by. He watched the rain streak the windows. They pulled up to a modest, brick apartment complex. It wasn't the slums, but it wasn't the glass tower Katsuki lived in. It looked lived in. There were bikes locked out front. There were flower boxes in the windows. It's on the 3rd floor, Izuku said, paying the driver. Elevator is in the back. Katsuki hobbled on his crutches. Every step sent a jolt of fire up his shins. They got into the elevator. It smelled like old carpet and lemon cleaner. Izuku fumbled with his keys at the door of apartment. His fingers slipped twice. Katsuki watched, biting his tongue to keep from offering help. He knew better now. Helping when not asked was an insult. Finally, the lock clicked. Welcome home, Izuku murmured, pushing the door open. Katsuki stepped inside. He stopped. His own apartment was a showroom. White leather. Chrome. Abstract art. Empty surfaces. Izuku's apartment was a nest. It was warm. The walls were painted a soft, creamy yellow. There were books everywhere, stacks of them on the floor, overflowing on the shelves. Quark theory. Hero history. Advanced mathematics. There were plants. Dozens of them. Ferns, succulents, trailing ivy on top of the fridge. And there were All Might figures. Not the rare, mint inbox collection Izuku used to have. He had sold most of those to pay for his medical bills, Katsuki realized with a pang, but small, cheap ones. The air smelled like vanilla, old paper, and Izuku. It hit Katsuki like a physical blow. This was the sanctum. This was the private world Izuku had built in the 2 years they had been apart. A world Katsuki had no place in. And now he was standing in the middle of it. Sorry about the mess, Izuku said nervously, kicking a stray shoe under the shoe rack. I wasn't expecting company. It's fine, Katsuki muttered. He felt huge in the small space. He felt like a bull in a china shop. Where do I sleep? Guest room. Through here. Izuku led him down a short hallway. The guest room was small, but clean. It had a single bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto the street, the same street Katsuki had patrolled every Tuesday. I put fresh sheets on, Izuku said. I moved some of your stuff. Kirishima dropped off a bag while you were sleeping. Katsuki looked at the bag in the corner. His clothes. His toiletries. He was moved in. Rest, Izuku ordered. I'm going to make dinner. Do you still eat spicy food? Or does it mess with the heart meds? I eat whatever I want, Katsuki growled, sitting on the edge of the bed. Mild curry it is, Izuku smiled faintly. He left the room, closing the door halfway. Katsuki sat there. He listened to the sounds of the apartment. He heard the fridge hum. He heard the clatter of pans in the kitchen. He heard Izuku humming a quiet, off-key tune. The orbit was gone. The distance was 0. Katsuki lay back on the bed. It was softer than his own. It smelled like Izuku's laundry detergent. He covered his eyes with his arm. I'm trapped, he thought. I am trapped in the one place I wanted to be, and I can't touch anything. The yearning that had been a dull roar for 2 years suddenly screamed. He was 10 feet away from Izuku. He was going to eat dinner with him. He was going to sleep down the hall from him. It was going to be torture. And it was going to be the best weeks of his life. 2 days later, domesticity was a weapon. Katsuki learned this quickly. The danger wasn't in the big moments, it was in the small ones. It was watching Izuku grade papers at the kitchen table, wearing reading glasses, chewing on the end of a pen. It was the sight of Izuku's socks mismatched, one green, one striped, sliding on the hardwood floor. It was the morning routine. Katsuki hobbled into the kitchen at 7 a.m. Izuku was already up. He was making coffee. He was wearing a t-shirt that was too big for him. The collar slipped, revealing the scar on his shoulder where the muscle had been reconstructed. Morning, Izuku yawned, rubbing his eyes. Coffee? Black, Katsuki said, leaning his crutches against the counter. I know. Izuku poured the cup. He brought it over. He set it down in front of Katsuki. Did you sleep okay? Izuku asked. Fine. Leg hurts. I have ice packs in the freezer. I'll get one. Izuku turned. As he did, he bumped into the table. The mug wobbled. Katsuki reached out to steady it. Izuku reached out at the same time. Their hands brushed. It wasn't a grab. It was a graze. Skin on skin. Izuku froze. Katsuki froze. Katsuki looked at Izuku's hand. The scars were intricate, white webbings across the back of his knuckles. His fingers were slightly crooked, but his skin was warm. For a second, neither of them moved. The air in the kitchen grew heavy, charged with the static electricity of 2 years of silence. Katsuki wanted to grab that hand. He wanted to thread his fingers through the gaps, scar against scar. He wanted to pull Izuku across the table and kiss the sleep from his eyes. Do it, the impulse whispered. You're right here. Just do it. But then he remembered the flinch at the bar. He remembered the fear. He pulled his hand back. Careful, Katsuki grunted, staring into his black coffee. Izuku pulled his hand back too. He tucked it into the pocket of his sweatpants, hiding it. Right? Izuku whispered. Careful. He went to the freezer. He got the ice pack. He wrapped it in a towel. He didn't hand it to Katsuki. He knelt down. Deku, what are you? Sit still, Izuku murmured. He placed the ice pack on Katsuki's shin. He held it there. Katsuki looked down at the top of Izuku's head. The green curls were messy. He could see the nape of his neck. Izuku stayed there, kneeling on the kitchen floor, holding ice against Katsuki's broken leg. It was an act of service. An act of devotion. You don't have to do this, Katsuki said, his voice rough. I want to, Izuku said. He didn't look up. I want to help you heal. But who helps you? Katsuki thought. Get up, Katsuki said, gently nudging Izuku with his knee. The floor is cold. You'll hurt your joints. Izuku stood up. He left the ice pack balanced on Katsuki's leg. I have to go to work, Izuku said, checking the clock. There's stew in the slow cooker for lunch. Don't try to lift the pot. Use a ladle. I'm not an invalid. You are right now. Izuku smiled. It was small, but it was real. See you tonight, Kaken. He grabbed his bag and left. Katsuki sat in the kitchen. He listened to the lock click. He touched the spot on his hand where Izuku had brushed him. It still burned. He looked around the quiet, sunlit apartment. He realized then that the building collapse hadn't trapped him in the rubble. It had trapped him in something far more dangerous. It had trapped him in a life he desperately wanted to keep, but knew he had to eventually leave. He picked up the coffee. It tasted like home. And it tasted like goodbye. The novelty of the arrangement wore off in 48 hours, replaced by a suffocating, terrifying routine. The apartment, which had initially felt like a sanctuary, began to shrink. With every passing day, the walls seemed to inch closer together, forcing their lives to overlap in ways Katsuki wasn't prepared for. Katsuki's physical recovery was rapid, his quirk-enhanced physiology knitting muscle and bone back together with aggressive speed, but his emotional endurance was fraying. He graduated from 2 crutches to 1. He could shower without fear of falling. He could make his own toast. But regaining his independence didn't fix the problem, it made it worse. Now that he didn't need Izuku to fetch him ice or carry his coffee, the excuse for their proximity was gone. Yet, neither of them pulled away. Instead, they entered a bizarre state of suspended animation. They became aggressively, painfully polite. Do you need the bathroom first? No, you go ahead. Thanks. Sorry. It was a constant, low-level hum of courtesy that drove Katsuki insane. It was the language of roommates or strangers on a train, not the language of 2 people who had shared a soul for a decade. Every thank you felt like a brick in a wall. Katsuki spent his days doing physical therapy exercises on the living room rug, counting reps to drown out the sound of Izuku breathing on the couch. Izuku spent his evenings grading papers with a frantic intensity, his eyes darting to Katsuki every time the hero shifted his weight. They were waiting for the other shoe to drop. They were waiting for the silence to break. And as the barometer on the wall began to plummet and the sky outside turned a bruised, violent purple, the atmosphere inside apartment 302 finally matched the storm brewing outside. The rain didn't stop. It settled over Mizudafu like a heavy gray blanket, turning the days into a blur of twilight and the nights into a symphony of thunder. 2 weeks. Katsuki had been living in apartment 302 for 14 days. It was the longest 2 weeks of his life. The apartment was a pressure cooker. It wasn't the size though it was small, it was the intimacy. There was nowhere to hide. If Katsuki coughed in the guest room, Izuku would appear in the doorway with a glass of water within 30 seconds. If Izuku dropped a pen in the living room, Katsuki would flinch, his body coiled to catch it before he remembered he was supposed to be a cripple. They were dancing around each other. A waltz of please, and thank you, and are you okay? That was driving Katsuki insane. He wanted the yelling back. He wanted the sparks. He wanted anything other than this fragile, glass-like politeness. Because beneath the politeness, the yearning was rotting him from the inside out. He watched Izuku constantly. He watched him grade papers, noticing how he had to take breaks to massage his cramped, scarred fingers. He watched him water the plants, talking to them softly. He watched him sleep on the couch on Friday nights when he fell asleep watching Hero News. Katsuki felt like a starving man sitting at a banquet he was forbidden to touch. It happened on a Tuesday. Naturally. The storm that had been threatening all week finally broke. It was a typhoon-level event. Wind lashed against the windows, rattling the frames. The power grid in District 4 flickered, browned out, and then died completely around 11 p.m. The apartment plunged into darkness. Katsuki was in the guest room, trying to sleep. His leg was aching a sharp, barometric pressure throb that the painkillers couldn't touch. His heart was racing, the graft sensitive to the electrical storm. He drifted into a fitful, shallow sleep. The dream. It was always the same dream. Choking, gray dust. He was pinned. Not by concrete, but by all for one's hand. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. And there was Izuku. Glowing. Burning. Izuku was ripping the quirks out of his own chest. He was tearing himself apart. Take it. Izuku screamed, his arms disintegrating into light. Take it all. Katsuki tried to scream, stop. But his mouth was full of blood. Izuku turned to him. His eyes were hollow. His arms were gone. You did this, Kaken, the dream Izuku whispered. You ate my heart. No. Katsuki woke up screaming. He sat bolt upright, gasping for air. His chest was heaving, the scar tissue pulling tight. He was drenched in sweat. His heart was hammering a frantic, lethal rhythm thud-thud-thud-thud. Kaken! The door burst open. A beam of light cut through the dark a flashlight. Izuku rushed in. He was wearing an oversized t-shirt and boxers. He dropped the flashlight on the desk and scrambled to the bed. Kaken! Breathe. It's okay. It's just a dream. Izuku didn't hesitate. He climbed onto the bed. He knelt beside Katsuki, ignoring the lack of personal space. Get off! Katsuki gasped, thrashing blindly. Get away! No. Look at me! Izuku grabbed him. He couldn't grip Katsuki's shoulders, his hands wouldn't close that tight, so he pressed his palms flat against Katsuki's cheeks, squishing his face, forcing him to look forward. I'm here, Izuku said firmly. I'm right here. I'm whole. Look at me. Katsuki stared wild-eyed into the darkness. He felt the warm, calloused palms on his face. He saw the green eyes reflecting the stray beam of the flashlight. Izuku. Not dust. Not light. Flesh and blood. Deku, Katsuki choked out. A sob ripped through his throat, painful and humiliating. I've got you, Izuku whispered. Breathe with me. Out. He moved one hand from Katsuki's face to his chest, placing it directly over the graft scar. He pressed down, a grounding weight. Feel that? Izuku asked softly. That's your heart. It's beating. You're alive. Katsuki squeezed his eyes shut. He focused on the hand on his chest. He focused on the heat. Slowly, the panic receded. The room stopped spinning. The roar in his ears faded to the sound of the rain battering the window. He slumped forward, his forehead hitting Izuku's shoulder. I'm sorry, Katsuki rasped into the cotton of Izuku's shirt. I'm sorry. Don't be, Izuku murmured. He wrapped his arms loosely around Katsuki's back, holding him. I have them too. The nightmares. They stayed like that for a long time. The storm raged outside, but inside the small room it was quiet. The power is out, Izuku whispered eventually. It's freezing in here. The heat is off. Katsuki realized he was shivering. The sweat on his skin had turned cold. Come to the living room, Izuku suggested. We can wrap up in the blankets. It's warmer. Katsuki didn't argue. He didn't have the energy to be tough. He let Izuku help him up. He leaned heavily on Izuku as they shuffled down the dark hallway, guided only by the flashlight beam bouncing off the walls. The living room was shadowed and strange. Izuku led him to the couch. He piled every blanket he owned onto it, a nest of wool and fleece. They sat down. It wasn't enough to just sit next to each other. The cold was biting. Under the blanket, Izuku instructed. They huddled together under the heavy duvet. Katsuki sat with his back to the armrest, his broken legs stretched out. Izuku sat next to him, close enough that their thighs pressed together from hip to knee. Izuku turned off the flashlight to save the battery. Now, there was only the lightning. Every few seconds, a flash of blue-white light would illuminate the room, freezing them in a strobe light tableau. Better? Izuku asked softly. Yeah. Katsuki's heart was still fluttering, an aftershock of the terror. He could smell Izuku's soap, sleep, and the ozone of the storm. Do you want to talk about it? Izuku asked. No. Okay. Silence stretched between them. But it wasn't the empty silence of the last 2 years. It was heavy. Loaded. Katsuki turned his head. In the flash of lightning, he saw Izuku looking at him. Izuku wasn't looking at the wall. He was watching Katsuki's profile. His expression was unreadable in the dark, sad? Longing? You saved me, Katsuki whispered. The words slipped out before he could check them. In the dream. You always save me. That's my job, Izuku said simply. It shouldn't be. Not anymore. It's a lifetime appointment, Kaken. Izuku shifted. He moved his hand under the blanket. He found Katsuki's hand. Katsuki stiffened. Izuku didn't try to hold it. He just laid his hand on top of Katsuki's. His palm was flat, his fingers slightly curled but unable to grip. It was a passive touch. A request. Katsuki looked at the hand. He remembered the shattered bones. He remembered the sound of the spoon clattering on the floor in rehab. He slowly, deliberately, turned his hand over. He interlaced their fingers. He squeezed. Not hard, he didn't want to hurt him, but firm. Izuku let out a shaky breath. He squeezed back as best he could, a weak, uneven pressure that broke Katsuki's heart. "Your hands are cold," Izuku whispered. "Your circulation esigus," Katsuki countered weakly. A crash of thunder shook the floorboards. Izuku flinched, instinctively pressing closer. He slid down a little, resting his head on Katsuki's shoulder. This was it. The breaking point. Katsuki felt the warmth of Izuku's cheek against his shirt. He felt the weight of him. He's right here, Katsuki thought. He's not a memory. He's not a billboard. He's right here in my arms, in the dark. The restraint Katsuki had built over 700 days crumbled. He turned his body. He freed his hand from the blanket and reached up. He cupped Izuku's jaw. Izuku went still. He lifted his head. Another flash of lightning lit up the room. Katsuki saw Izuku's face. His eyes were wide, dark, and dilated. His lips were parted slightly. He looked terrified. But he didn't pull away. "Kaken?" Izuku breathed. "You're too close," Katsuki whispered. His voice was rough, dangerous. "You're too dim and close, Deku." "I'm not close enough," Izuku replied. The honesty of it was a physical blow. Katsuki leaned in. He moved slowly, giving Izuku 1,000 chances to run. 1,000 chances to push him away. Izuku didn't run. He leaned in too. His eyes fluttered closed. He tilted his chin up. Their noses brushed. Katsuki could feel Izuku's breath on his lips, sweet, warm, alive. It was everything Katsuki had wanted for 10 years. It was the end of the war. It was the peace treaty. His thumb brushed Izuku's cheekbone. He was millimeters away. He could taste the kiss. If I kiss him, Katsuki thought, his mind racing, I ruin him. The thought was ice water in his veins. If I kiss him, I drag him back into my mess. I make him a target again. I make him the partner of the number 2 hero, the man who lives in violence. He deserves peace. He deserves a civilian life. He deserves someone who didn't bully him. Someone who didn't cost him his arms. I am a parasite. I am taking his warmth because I am cold. I am using him. Katsuki stopped. He froze, his lips a breath away from Izuku's. He heard Izuku make a small, needy sound in his throat, a whimper of anticipation. That sound destroyed him. Katsuki pulled back. He jerked his head away, physically recoiling, slamming his back against the armrest of the couch. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He looked dazed, confused. He looked like he'd been slapped. "Kaken?" "No," Katsuki rasped. He sounded panicked. "No. I can't." He scrambled to disentangle himself from the blanket. He shoved Izuku's hand away. "I can't do this to you." "Do what?" Izuku asked, his voice trembling. He sat up, reaching out. "Kaken, wait. This." Katsuki gestured wildly at the space between them. "Playing house. Pretending like this is normal. It's not normal, Hideki. I'm not supposed to be here. You live here. I'm recovering here. There's a difference." Katsuki pushed himself off the couch. His legs screamed in protest, buckling under him. He grabbed the wall to stay upright. "I'm leaving," Katsuki panted. "The storm can go to hell. I'm calling a cab." "You can't leave." Izuku stood up, stumbling over the blankets. "It's a typhoon. You're hurt. What is wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me?" Katsuki laughed. It was a dark, jagged sound. "Everything. Everything is wrong with me. And if I stay here one more minute, I'm going to infect you with it." "Infect me?" Izuku looked baffled. "Kaken, you're not a disease. I am to you." The lightning flashed again, illuminating Katsuki's face. It was twisted in agony. "I am the worst thing that ever happened to you, Izuku," Katsuki shouted. The name felt heavy on his tongue. "I took your power. I took your arms. And now I'm lying on your couch stealing your heat because I'm too weak to generate my own. He turned toward the hallway. I'm done taking from you. I'm done. Stop. Izuku moved. He didn't run, he couldn't run fast anymore, but he threw himself into Katsuki's path. He blocked the hallway. He stood there, barefoot, shivering in his oversized t-shirt, his scarred arms spread wide to bar the way. Get out of the way, Katsuki growled. Make me, Izuku challenged. His voice shook, but his eyes were blazing with that old green fire. You want to leave? You have to move me. And you promised you'd never hurt me again. Katsuki froze. He looked at the boy he loved. He looked at the barrier he couldn't cross. Why are you doing this? Katsuki whispered, defeated. Why do you want me here? Because I'm selfish. Izuku yelled back, tears finally spilling over. Because I don't care about the past. I don't care about the quirks. I just want you. You don't know what you want. You're just lonely. Don't tell me what I feel. They stood there in the dark hallway, breathing heavily, the air between them electric with unsaid confessions and years of trauma. Go back to the couch, Katsuki said finally. His voice was dead. I'll stay in the guest room. I'll lock the door. Kaken. I said I'll stay. But don't touch me again. Okay? Just don't. He stepped around Izuku. He walked into the guest room and closed the door. He turned the lock. He slid down the door until he hit the floor. He pressed his hands over his ears to block out the sound of Izuku crying in the hallway. He sat there in the dark, touching his own lips, tasting the ghost of the kiss that never happened, and hating himself more than he ever had in his life. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. On the other side of the wood, the crying eventually stopped. It was replaced by the soft, shuffling sound of footsteps retreating to the living room, followed by the heavy silence of a house divided. Katsuki didn't move from the floor for a long time. He sat with his back against the door, his broken leg throbbing in time with his heartbeat, staring into the pitch black of the guest room. He didn't sleep. Sleep was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt the ghost of Izuku's breath on his lips. He felt the phantom warmth of Izuku's hand covering his own. The memory was a physical torment, taunting him with how close he had come to taking something he didn't deserve. I almost did it, Katsuki thought, disgusted with himself. I almost dragged him down with me. The storm raged for hours, battering the window pane, but eventually, the thunder faded. The wind died down. The chaotic noise of the typhoon was replaced by a stillness that felt even colder. By 4 a.m., Katsuki had made his decision. He dragged himself up from the floor. He ignored the screaming protest of his crush injury. He moved around the dark room by the light of the street lamps outside, packing his bag with jerky, efficient movements. Toothbrush, charger, t-shirt. He was going to leave. He was going to sneak out at first light, call a cab, and disappear back into his glass tower before Izuku woke up. It was the coward's way out, but it was the only way to keep the line drawn. He sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, his bag at his feet, watching the window turn from black to gray to a blinding, mocking blue. When the sun finally hit the floorboards, Katsuki grabbed his crutch. He steeled himself against the inevitable confrontation, or the hope of avoiding one. He reached for the lock that he had replayed the near kiss 1,000 times, dissecting it like a failed mission. Failure point, emotional compromise. Failure point, loss of distance. Failure point, wanting it. He grabbed his bag. He grabbed his crutch. He opened the door. The hallway was empty. Katsuki limped to the living room. The blankets were still piled on the couch, a chaotic nest where they had almost ruined everything. He looked away, his stomach twisting. He moved to the front door. He needed to leave before Izuku woke up. He needed to vanish before he could be convinced to stay. He reached for the handle. The elevator is out. Katsuki froze. Izuku was sitting at the kitchen table. He was wrapped in a thick cardigan, clutching a mug of coffee with both hands. He looked like he had aged 10 years in one night. His eyes were red-rimmed, bruised with exhaustion. He wasn't looking at Katsuki, he was staring into his black coffee. The storm fried the circuits, Izuku said, his voice flat. I got an email from the building manager. Maintenance won't be here until tomorrow. Katsuki gripped the handle of his crutch. I'll take the stairs. You're on the 3rd floor. You have a crush injury on your leg. You can't navigate the stairs with a bag and a crutch. Watch me. Katsuki opened the door. He stepped out into the hallway. He made it 3 steps toward the stairwell before his leg buckled. The pain was blinding, a white-hot spike that shot from his shin to his hip. He gasped, stumbling, his shoulders slamming into the wall to keep from falling. Kaken! Izuku was there in a second. He didn't touch him, he remembered the order, but he hovered, his hands raised, ready to catch. Don't, Katsuki hissed, squeezing his eyes shut against the pain. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're stubborn. And you're an idiot. Izuku stepped in front of him, blocking the path to the stairs. Move, Deku. No. Izuku looked up. His face was pale, set in a line of grim determination. You want to leave? Fine. But you're not walking down 3 flights of stairs on a broken leg just to spite me. You wait for the elevator. You leave tomorrow. I can't stay here, Katsuki rasped. Not after last night. But because you almost kissed me? Or because you didn't? Katsuki flinched. The words hung in the hallway, sharp and undeniable. Go back inside, Kaken, Izuku said softly. Please. But sit down. Put your leg up. We don't have to talk. You can ignore me. But don't hurt yourself just to get away from me. Katsuki looked at the stairs. He looked at his throbbing leg. He looked at Izuku's desperate eyes. He let out a long, defeated sigh. He turned around and limped back into the apartment. The day was a study in misery. They retreated to their corners. Katsuki sat in the guest room, leg elevated, staring out the window at the sunny street. Izuku sat in the living room, grading papers with a furious, scratching intensity. The apartment felt like a bomb site. The silence wasn't polite anymore, it was radioactive. Around noon, Katsuki's stomach growled. He ignored it. He wasn't going to go out there. He wasn't going to risk another encounter. 10 minutes later, there was a knock on the door frame. Katsuki didn't turn. I made sandwiches, Izuku said. Ham and cheese. I left a plate by the door. I'm not hungry. Eat it anyway. Your meds need food. Footsteps retreated. Katsuki waited 5 minutes. Then, hating himself, he got up, hobbled to the door, grabbed the plate, and retreated back into his cave. He ate the sandwich. It was cut into triangles. Just the way his mom used to do it. He lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The anger was fading, replaced by a deep, crushing exhaustion. He was tired of fighting. He was tired of running. I love him, Katsuki thought, the admission circling his brain like a shark. I love him, and I'm sitting in his guest room eating his food, and I'm treating him like an enemy. Why am I doing this? Because I'm poison, the old voice answered. Because I break things. But he didn't look broken last night, a new voice whispered. He looked hopeful. Katsuki closed his eyes. Evening fell. The apartment grew dark. Katsuki heard movement in the living room. The TV turned on low volume. The smell of tea drifted down the hall. He couldn't take it anymore. The isolation was worse than the fighting. He grabbed his crutch. He walked out. Izuku was sitting on the floor, leaning against the couch, watching the weather report. He looked up when Katsuki entered. He tensed, bracing for another shout. Katsuki didn't shout. He walked over to the armchair and sat down. He put his leg up on the ottoman. Is the elevator fixed? Katsuki asked. No, Izuku said quietly. Tomorrow morning. Right. They sat in the blue glow of the TV. Kaken, Izuku said after a long time. He didn't look away from the screen. You said, last night. You said you were the worst thing that ever happened to me. Katsuki's jaw tightened. I am. That's statistically incorrect. Katsuki looked at him. Ha! Izuku finally turned. He pushed his glasses up his nose. I did the math, Izuku said. I made a list. You made a list? Yes. Of the worst things that happened to me. Izuku started counting on his scarred fingers. 1. The doctor telling me I was corkless at 4. 2. All Might telling me I couldn't be a hero on the rooftop. 3. Losing One for All. He looked at Katsuki. You're not in the top 3. I bullied you for a decade, Katsuki snapped. I told you to kill yourself. I beat you up. Yes. You did. And that is it. It was terrible. Izuku didn't flinch from the truth. But then you saved me from the sludge villain. You helped me train for the sports festival. You caught me when I fell at the USJ. You cooked for me when I was studying. Izuku turned his body fully toward the armchair. You think you're the villain of my story, Kaken. But you're not. You're the plot. Katsuki stared at him. The plot? Without you, I wouldn't have pushed myself. Without you, I wouldn't have learned how to fight. Without you, I wouldn't have anyone to chase. You don't chase me anymore, Katsuki rasped. You stopped. I didn't stop, Izuku whispered. I just fell behind. And you kept running. I ran away from you. I know. And I waited. Izuku stood up. He walked over to the armchair. He didn't kneel this time. He sat on the ottoman, next to Katsuki's broken leg. You think you're protecting me by staying away, Izuku said. But you're just making me lonely. Katsuki felt his throat close up. I'm dangerous, Deku. I'm violent. I'm loud. I attract trouble. I was the #1 hero, Izuku countered. I fought Shigaraki. Do you really think I'm scared of a little trouble? I'm scared of me hurting you. Katsuki shouted, the dam finally breaking. I'm scared that I'll say the wrong thing. That I'll squeeze too hard. That I'll be too much. He grabbed his hair, pulling at the roots. I look at your arms, Katsuki choked out, and I see my fault. I see what my life cost you. How can I kiss you when I'm the reason you can't hold a glass? Silence. Izuku looked down at his hands. He opened and closed them. They were stiff, the movement jerky. Give me your hand, Izuku said. No. Kaken. Give me your hand. Katsuki hesitated. Then, slowly he held out his right hand. Izuku took it. He didn't hold it like a normal person. He couldn't wrap his fingers around it. Instead, he placed his palm against Katsuki's palm. He interlaced their fingers loosely, then used his other hand to press them together, locking them in place. Squeeze, Izuku ordered. I'll hurt you. Squeeze my hand, Katsuki. Katsuki squeezed. Gently. Harder, Izuku said. Deku. Harder. I'm not made of glass. Katsuki squeezed harder. He felt the resistance of Izuku's scarred skin. He felt the metal rods deep inside the bones. Does that hurt? Katsuki whispered. A little, Izuku admitted. But I can feel you. He looked up, his eyes shining. I lost my sensation in my fingertips, Izuku whispered. Most of it. The nerves are shot. But I can feel pressure. I can feel warmth. When you squeeze. It proves I'm still here. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against their joined hands. Your guilt isn't protecting me, Kaken. It's just starving us both. You think I'm broken? Fine. I'm broken. But I'm still functional. I still want things. What do you want? Katsuki asked, his voice trembling. Izuku looked up. I want you to stop acting like you're a consolation prize. I want you to stop acting like you owe me a debt. He took a deep breath. I saved you because I loved you. Not because I wanted you to be my nurse. Not because I wanted you to be guilty. I saved you because a world without Kaken was. It was boring. And quiet. And I hated it. Katsuki looked at the man sitting in front of him. He realized then that he had been so busy mourning the Izuku who died, the hero, the rival, the god, that he hadn't bothered to meet the Izuku who survived. The Izuku who survived was tougher. He was smarter. And he was stubborn as hell. You're annoying, Katsuki whispered, a tear slipping down his cheek. I know, Izuku smiled. It was watery but real. I'm the worst. The absolute worst. Katsuki shifted his hand. He adjusted his grip, finding a way to hold Izuku that was firm but safe, intertwining their fingers so the pressure was even. I'm not going to leave tomorrow, Katsuki said. Izuku's breath hitched. You're not? No. My leg hurts. And your couch is terrible. I need to supervise you so you don't buy any more ugly furniture. Izuku let out a wet laugh. My furniture is fine. It's beige de. It's tragic. Katsuki leaned forward. He moved slowly, broadcasting his intent. He didn't go for the mouth. He went for the forehead. He pressed his lips to the scar just above Izuku's eyebrow. He lingered there, breathing in the scent of vanilla and rain. I'm staying, Katsuki murmured against his skin. I'm staying until you kick me out. Then you're going to be here a long time, Izuku whispered. Katsuki pulled back just enough to look him in the eye. Good. I have a lot of time. He moved his hand to cup Izuku's cheek. I love you, Izuku. It was the first time he had said it out loud. It didn't feel like an explosion. It felt like a lock clicking into place. Izuku closed his eyes, a single tear tracking over Katsuki's thumb. I love you too, Katsuki. They sat there in the blue light of the television, holding hands in a way that hurt a little, but felt like everything. The elevator was broken. The storm had passed. And the war, finally, was over. The words hung in the air, heavier and more permanent than the storm that had passed. I love you. They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. The confession acted like a pressure valve, releasing the steam that had built up inside the small apartment for 2 weeks for 2 years. They stayed in the living room as the hours ticked by. The Weather Channel droned on in the background, a low loop of forecasts and radar maps that neither of them were watching. They were too busy existing in this new, fragile reality where they were allowed to touch. Katsuki kept his thumb moving over Izuku's knuckles, a repetitive, grounding motion. Izuku didn't move away. He sat on the ottoman, his body slowly losing the tension that had held him upright for so long. Eventually, exhaustion won out over adrenaline. We should go to bed, Izuku mumbled around 2 a.m., his eyes drooping. Your leg needs to be elevated properly. I'm fine, Katsuki murmured, leaning his head back against the armchair. Too much effort to move. It was a lie. He could have moved. But moving meant letting go of Izuku's hand. Moving meant separating into different rooms, the guest room and the master bedroom, and tonight, the idea of a wall between them felt intolerable. Izuku didn't argue. He was fighting a losing battle against gravity. His head bobbed. He shifted, trying to get comfortable on the small ottoman. Slowly, inevitably, he slumped forward. It didn't pull away. He leaned into the heat source. His cheek came to rest against Katsuki's thigh, just above the knee of his good leg. He curled his legs up, settling into the small space between the chair and the table. Katsuki stiffened for a second, instinct screaming to protect the injured limb. But Izuku was careful, even in sleep. He avoided the crush injury, seeking only the solid, warm presence of Katsuki. Katsuki looked down. He watched Izuku's breathing even out. He watched the tension bleed from his shoulders. He could have woken him up. He could have told him to go to his own bed. Instead, Katsuki reached out and turned off the lamp. He sat in the dark, listening to the city breathe, guarding the sleep of the boy who had waited for him. His neck was going to hurt like hell in the morning, and his leg was throbbing, but as he closed his eyes, Katsuki decided it was a fair price to pay for the weight of Izuku against his side. The morning after the storm was quiet. Not the terrified, sterile silence of the hospital, nor the heavy, loaded silence of the last 2 weeks. It was a warm, golden silence. The kind that smelled like dust motes and drying rain. Katsuki woke up first. His neck was stiff. He was sleeping at a 45-degree angle in an armchair, after all, and his broken leg was throbbing with a dull, rhythmic ache. But he didn't move. He couldn't move. He was pinned. Izuku had migrated during the night. He had started on the ottoman, but at some point, gravity and exhaustion had pulled him forward. He was currently asleep with his head resting on Katsuki's thigh, his cheek pressed against the denim of Katsuki's jeans. His hand, the one Katsuki had squeezed, was still loosely interlaced with Katsuki's, resting on the armrest. Katsuki stared down at him. Izuku was drooling slightly. His glasses were crooked, mashed against his face. His hair was a bird's nest of green curls. He looked terrible. He looked perfect. Katsuki carefully, slowly, extracted his hand from Izuku's grip. He reached out and gently pulled the glasses off Izuku's face, setting them on the side table. Izuku stirred. He grunted, nuzzling deeper into Katsuki's leg. 5 more minutes, Mom, Izuku mumbled. Katsuki smirked. He rested his hand on top of Izuku's head, his fingers burying themselves in the soft curls. I'm not your mom, nerd, Katsuki whispered. Izuku froze. The realization hit him in slow motion. Katsuki felt Izuku's muscles tense. He saw the breath hitch. Izuku shot up. He scrambled back, nearly falling off the ottoman. He looked at Katsuki, then at the window, then back at Katsuki. His face turned a violent, radioactive red. I fell asleep. Izuku squeaked. On your leg. I'm so sorry. Did I hurt you? Is the crush injury okay? Calm down, Katsuki grunted. My leg is fine. You, however, drool like a Saint Bernard. Izuku slapped his hands over his mouth, mortified. I do not. There's a wet spot on my jeans that says otherwise. Izuku looked like he wanted to phase through the floor. I'll wash them. Deku. Katsuki reached out. He grabbed Izuku's wrist. Shut up. It's fine. Izuku stopped. He looked at Katsuki's hand on his wrist. He looked up at Katsuki's face. The panic faded, replaced by a shy, tentative hope. You stayed, Izuku whispered. I told you I would. I thought, maybe I dreamt it. The storm. The holding hands. You didn't dream it. Katsuki ran his thumb over the pulse point on Izuku's wrist. It was beating fast. I'm here. A knock at the door made them both jump. Maintenance, a voice called out from the hallway. Building manager said the elevator is fried. We're here to check the breaker. The real world was intruding. Izuku scrambled to his feet. I have to let them in. He rushed to the door, tripping over the pile of blankets. Katsuki watched him go, a small, fond smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He looked at his leg. It hurt like hell. He needed his meds. He needed coffee. But for the first time in 2 years, he didn't need to leave. The elevator was fixed by noon. The maintenance crew left, taking their noise and their tools with them. The path to the exit was clear. Katsuki could call a cab. He could go back to his glass tower. He didn't. Instead, he was in the kitchen. He was leaning on the counter, watching Izuku try to open a jar of pasta sauce. It was painful to watch. Izuku had the jar wedged between his elbow and his ribs, trying to twist the lid with his left hand. His fingers slipped. He gritted his teeth, his face scrunching in frustration. He tried again. Katsuki didn't intervene immediately. He waited. Damn it, Izuku whispered. He set the jar down. He looked defeated. Need a hand? Katsuki asked casually. Izuku looked up. I can do it. I just need a better grip. You have nerve damage, Deku. It's not a matter of will. It's physics. Katsuki walked over. He didn't shove Izuku aside. He stood next to him, their arms brushing. Here, Katsuki said. He didn't open the jar. He placed his right hand over Izuku's left hand. He wrapped his fingers around Izuku's fingers, molding them to the lid. Squeeze, Katsuki murmured. I can't. Yes, you can. I'm the exoskeleton. You're the pilot. Squeeze. Katsuki applied the pressure. He used his strength to clamp Izuku's fingers onto the metal. Now twist. They turned their hands together. The seal broke. Izuku let out a breath of pure relief. Oh. See. Katsuki murmured. He didn't let go. His hand was still wrapped around Izuku's, warm and large and protective. We just have to adjust the strategy. Izuku looked down at their hands. He rotated his wrist, turning his palm up so it pressed against Katsuki's palm. Your hands are shaking, Izuku whispered. Adrenaline crash. Katsuki lied. Lie. You're scared. Katsuki stiffened. I'm not scared of a jar of sauce. You're scared of this. Izuku looked up. You're scared that if you touch me too much, I'll break. Or you'll leave. I'm not leaving. Then kiss me. The command was soft, but it hit Katsuki like a physical blow. He looked at Izuku. The green eyes were clear. Expectant. I haven't brushed my teeth, Katsuki deflected, panic rising. I don't care. My breath smells like coffee. I like coffee. Izuku stepped closer. He put his free hand, the right one, on Katsuki's waist. He couldn't grip the fabric, so he just rested his palm there, a grounding weight. "Kaken," Izuku whispered. "Stop finding reasons to be the villain. Just be the guy who kisses me." Katsuki let out a shuddering breath. He lowered his head. He didn't rush. He gave Izuku every microsecond to pull away. But Izuku rose on his toes. He met him halfway. The kiss wasn't an explosion. It wasn't fireworks. It was coming home. It was soft. Careful. Katsuki's lips were chapped. Izuku's were warm. It tasted like coffee and morning breath and relief. Katsuki made a noise low in his throat, a sound of surrender. He slid his hand from Izuku's fingers to the back of his neck, tangling his fingers in the green curls, holding him there. They broke apart slowly. They didn't go far. Their foreheads rested together. "Okay." Izuku breathed. "Yeah," Katsuki rasped. "Okay." He kissed him again. This time, deeper. Desperate. He poured 2 years of silence, 2 years of patrolling in the rain, 2 years of hating himself into the kiss. When they finally separated, Izuku was flushed and smiling. "The sauce," Izuku pointed out breathlessly. "We need to make lunch." "Screw the sauce," Katsuki muttered, burying his face in Izuku's neck. "I'm not hungry." 1 month later, the dynamite agency was buzzing. "Sir, the press conference is in 20 minutes. Burnin shouted, chasing Katsuki down the hall. "They want a statement on the repairs to District 4. "I already gave a statement." Katsuki barked, adjusting his tie. "Tell them the concrete is drying and to stop asking stupid questions." He walked into his office. He slammed the door. He let out a long sigh. He was tired. His leg was mostly healed. He was off the crutches. Just a slight limp left, but the workload was insane. He walked to his desk. He froze. There was a bento box sitting on his desk. It was wrapped in an all-might handkerchief. There was a note on top. Katsuki picked it up. "Kaken, you forgot your lunch." "I dropped it off with the receptionist. She seems terrified of you. You should probably smile more. Contains spicy curry, mildly spicy, don't complain. P.S. Don't be late tonight. It's movie night. You picked the movie, so if it SCKS, I'm revoking your remote privileges. Izuku." Katsuki stared at the note. A warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with his quirk. He wasn't just the number 2 hero anymore. He wasn't just the survivor of the war. He was the guy who had a lunch waiting for him. He was the guy who had a movie night to get to. He sat down. He unwrapped the bento. It was katsudon. It wasn't perfect. The breading was a little uneven. Izuku's hands still struggled with the breading process. The vegetables were chopped in irregular chunks. But it was the best diamond katsudon Katsuki had ever seen. He picked up his chopsticks. He took a bite. He pulled out his phone. He opened the contact that used to be just Deku. He had changed it 3 weeks ago. "Katsuki, the food is edible." "Barely." "Katsuki, I'll be home at." The reply came instantly. "Izuku, love you too, Kaken." Katsuki stared at the little heart emoji. He scowled. But as he ate his lunch in his glass tower, overlooking the city he had saved, Katsuki Bakugo smiled. It was a small, private smile. The kind that belonged to a man who had finally put down the war and picked up a life. 6 months later. The evening air was crisp, smelling of autumn leaves and distant rain. Katsuki sat on the balcony of apartment. He had kept his own apartment for appearance's sake, but he hadn't slept there in months. The small, brick building with the vanilla candles, was home. He held a cup of tea in his hands. His leg ached a little in the cold, a permanent reminder of the collapse, but it was a manageable pain. The glass door slid open. Izuku stepped out. He was wearing one of Katsuki's hoodies, black, with the orange X on the chest. It swallowed him. "It's cold," Izuku said, shivering. "Put on a jacket." I'm wearing yours." Izuku walked over. He sat on the bench next to Katsuki. He didn't ask for permission. He just tucked himself into Katsuki's side, stealing his warmth. Katsuki lifted his arm, draping it around Izuku's shoulders, pulling him closer. They sat there in silence, watching the city lights of Mizudafu blink on. They released the hero billboard charts today, Izuku said softly. I know. You're number one. Katsuki took a sip of tea. Yeah. How does it feel? Katsuki looked at the city. He thought about the mountain he had climbed. He thought about the boy who had fallen so he could rise. It feels like a job, Katsuki said. Just a job. He looked down at Izuku. It's not the best thing that happened to me today. Izuku looked up, smiling. Oh, what was? You didn't burn the toast this morning. Izuku laughed, nudging Katsuki's ribs. Hey, the toaster is faulty. The toaster is fine. Your settings are the problem. Katsuki set his tea down. He reached for Izuku's hand. He took it. He ran his thumb over the white, webbed scars on the knuckles. He traced the lines of the metal rods beneath the skin. He brought the hand to his lips. He kissed the scars. One by one. It was a ritual. A daily penance and a daily thanksgiving. I'm going to retire early, Katsuki said suddenly. Izuku stiffened. What? You just got number one. I mean eventually. In 10 years. Maybe 15. Katsuki looked at him intensely. I'm not going to die on the job, Izuku. I'm not going to leave you alone. Izuku's eyes widened. They shined with unshed tears. You promise? I promise. Katsuki squeezed Izuku's hand. He felt the weak, trembling pressure return the squeeze. We have a lot of time, Katsuki whispered. Yeah, Izuku said, resting his head on Katsuki's shoulder. We do. They sat on the balcony, hand in hand, two broken pieces that had fit themselves back together. The war was a memory. The guilt was a shadow. And the quiet wasn't lonely anymore. It was peace.